I'm excited for this one.
Yeah,
Garrett Gross, thank you for coming on, brother.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, man.
You have just recently, by winning the Cage of Honors championship belt, decided to put a cap on your MMA career. I think that choice is difficult for any fighter, especially compounded when you think about the amount of time that you've committed to this sport, to martial arts in general, and just the overall body of work. So before we get to the variables, I'd like to understand, what was that moment for you? How much thought did you put into that decision, and how heavy did it weigh on you?
So I'd been thinking about it for a while. You know, I fought on the Contender Series in 2018. Fought after that and lost, and then got a couple wins. But you know, age is going up. So at that time, I had to just be a little more realistic on what could happen. You know, like what the reality of if I could sign somewhere, that type of stuff. If I did, what type of money could I make in that short amount of time? You know. So it was tough because you still feel like you got it right, and then
Well, you do. That's the tough part.
My last fight was the first fight that I'd ever done with a sober camp. So I'd fought for almost 15 years, and was never sober through the whole time. You know, so that's kind of why I wanted to do that fight. 'Cause I felt good mentally. I felt better physically. I felt better than I ever have. But I'm 36. You know what I mean? So it doesn't matter if I won my next 5 or 6 in a row. You know, at 36, I'm not signing. I'm not making any money. So at that point, it was just kind of it was something for me because I wanted to finish on a win. Thank God that I did. Went out the best way that I possibly could at this point in my career. You know,
A champion, Cage of Honors, a good promotion, on a W, put a cap on it. I resonate with that feeling of like, you know, I don't have it like I used to, but there's still something there.
Sure.
So I agree 100% with a thought process going into it, because I did the exact same thing. When you're single and you don't have a whole lot of options, you're like, well, what am I giving up for training? Like, right. I can train 4 or 5 hours a day, and it's sure. fine. But then you have children, or then you get married, or then you get married and have children, and then suddenly your time is not just your time. Sure. The opportunity cost of like, what am I giving up for what it is that I'm doing exponentially sure. increases. And it was tough to sit there and tell everybody that I'm like, I want to be a family man, and I want to be a good father, and I want to do all these things. Not saying that you can't do it being a fighter,
right.
But I think once you get to that point where you're deciding to have a wife and children, fighting needs to be the only thing you're doing. You can't be working the 9 to 5 and then training for a fight and then expect to have time for all these other things. It's just, there's not enough hours in the day.
Yeah.
So I think that for those of the fighters that do that, kudos to you. I'm not saying that it's not impossible. All I'm saying is that for me, the juice was no longer worth the squeeze.
Sure.
And I thought for the first time, I started looking at fighting as like a selfish act. Like, I am now doing this for myself.
I look at that. Most of my career was that way.
Selfish act?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I was at American Top Team for, I think, almost 5 years. All I did was train. I had a wife and a son, but all I cared about was getting to the UFC.
Fighting.
You know what I mean? That's all I thought about. You know, so I was wrong. You know.
Do you think it affected everything else?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Being a father, being a husband.
I'm called to lead the household, and when you put yourself first, you ain't doing that.
Yeah.
You know.
It's tough though, because then how do you tell somebody like to be successful in an endeavor, you have to be obsessed and pursue it, but simultaneously tell them that they have to be selfless in certain other aspects? That's why I think it's so impossible to do.
Sure.
And to those that can do it, the utmost respect. I'm not trying to say that like, if you have a kid, you can't pursue your goals and all these other things. I guess what I'm trying to say is, for me, for my anecdotal evidence, I just could not I looked at it, I tried. I was like, okay, 24 hours in the day, I spend 6 sleeping. What am I doing with the other 18? I could not make up the time. I couldn't make up the difference.
Yeah.
And then once I stopped fighting, I hate to say it this way, but it's the truth. It's like 3-4 hours a day now becomes open to me.
Right.
And, you know, my daughter goes to sleep at 7:30 because she's little, you know what I mean?
Right.
What am I doing until, 11, 12 o'clock before I go to bed? It allowed me the opportunity to really spend some time in my professional career and everything else. And everything just started going in the positive trajectory. And I get that same feeling. Every time I go to fights, I'm like, I'm only 32.
Yeah.
Dude, I could get back into camp
Yeah.
and I can fucking do this shit.
Yeah.
But then the very next thing I think is, okay, but for what purpose?
Sure.
Am I going to get signed to the UFC? Am I going to do this, that, or the other? The amount of things that would have to happen in succession for that to happen are so astronomically small that it is now a selfish act to pursue this.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of
I
ego
felt
swallowing.
relieved, really, actually, when I
Really?
retired. Yeah.
like it's over.
That is like that I finished the way that I wanted to.
So if you would have lost, would you would have done it again?
No, I wouldn't have.
Okay.
This was going to be it for me, regardless, win or lose.
Win or lose. Okay.
Yeah.
Was that a conversation you had with other people around you,
with
your
my
coaches?
with my wife? Yeah. With some of the other coaches, not they wouldn't have cared if I continued to fight, but again, there was no reward for the risk there. You know, so what's the point of spending that extra time in the gym preparing for a fight when you're also, again, working? There's not really a point to it.
No.
I mean I get, like, I still love to fight, but I can go to the gym and spar or grapple or whatever it is and get somewhat of the same thing from it.
In your training post competition, does it still scratch that itch?
I mean, I'm a natural competitor. I love to compete. So maybe I'll do like some jiu-jitsu tournaments and stuff like that. But really, I just want to take that time and invest in my kids. My daughter's in gymnastics. Both my sons are in wrestling.
God bless.
And that takes a lot of time too, which I'd rather take that time and help them.
How old are your kids again?
12, 7, 6. 2 boys and a girls.
Yeah, but they're not like little. They're getting 12 is like starting to push up like what, middle school, getting close to high school,
Yeah.
and then 6 and 7. Yeah, I mean, dude, now's the time where, more importantly, they're gonna remember all of this.
Sure.
It's not like when they're like 2 or 3, you can kind of get away with not being there as much. Now it's like they're gonna remember all of these things.
Absolutely.
Just wanted to take a second to pause the action and just tell you guys thank you so much for consuming our content. Easy Talk is a passion project. This podcast is just a bunch of like-minded people coming together to produce some cool stuff and talk to some cool people. One of the things I would very much appreciate is if you could possibly like the video or subscribe to the channel, just because it helps us in the algorithm and ultimately to grow, to get more exposure to everybody, including ourselves, and ultimately just make a better product. Take a second. I'd greatly appreciate it. And on with the show. At least that's how I feel, because that's when my memory started.
Yeah, I think I remember back to maybe like 4 years old as a kid.
Yeah.
But generally, like, the stuff that you remember isn't that bad things.
No, but can I
You
be
know
honest
what
with
I
you? It's like random shit.
Yeah.
Like random little things. I remember some big things,
Right.
but then I'll remember some things like, my mom gave me like a lecture one time when I was like 5 years old as a kid about food.
Right.
And about how like she grew up poor and she didn't have food, and like how lucky I was to have the abundance that I had, because I didn't want to eat some soup.
Right.
I'm 5 years old. Tell me why I'm 32 years old and I could recite to you that whole lecture.
Yeah.
Like that one stuck in. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
no one punched that out of me.
Sure.
This is something that I've had to kind of deal with myself, is the loss of fighter as a title. I'm no longer a fighter, so I'm not competing anymore. And when I was fighting, I thought that when that day would occur, that it would be an immensely difficult task for me to undertake, both physically and mentally. I was positively surprised that when that day did come, it was actually a much easier pill to swallow. But I'm not sure if I am the exception to the rule. I know that you had the discussion with your wife, with your coaches, with everybody, that this was going to be your last one. But what was that like, accepting it in your heart and in your mind? Easier than you thought it would have been? Or
Yeah,
harder?
definitely, because I found that my identity is not in something, that it's in Christ. So when I realized that my, regardless of what I do, whether it's fighting or working or being on a podcast, my job is to share the gospel, share Christ. That's where my identity is. So, I mean, really, like, you can't lose. You can't lose. So, yeah, there's difficult decisions you have to make, but Romans 8:28 says all things work together for the good to those who love God. So that's what I stand on.
Your faith, was this something that you always felt passionate about and had in your heart, or was this something that came a little later in life?
No, so I didn't grow up in church. I'd have a buddy or something that would invite me every once in a while. So, I've been a couple times. But, I mean, everybody I knew were Christians, or claimed to be anyways.
Well, you said they were. They went to church, therefore they are, right?
Right, sure. So I started drinking really early. At about 12 years old was the first time I drank alcohol.
Party, family, what was the catalyst?
So we would
for
go
this?
out camping, me and a couple buddies, and we would camp at this old coal mines called Majestic Mines. And there would be like a bunch of other people out there camping, high schoolers and stuff like that. And one of them gave me a stag beer, and it was the first time that I ever drank. But I have an addictive personality, which obviously I didn't know at 12 years old. But
12 years old is what, 7th grade, 8th grade, like middle school, right before high school?
6th or 7th grade, yeah. And from there, I just kind of kept doing it. Not frequently, but if I was out there camping, I would drink, smoke.
Cigarettes, weed.
Cigarettes. 7th grade was the first time I smoked weed.
Do you think that a part of it was also because it was the older crowd and it was like an affinity that you found?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
hey, I'm hanging out with these older people.
Yeah, I thought they were cool.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It was definitely an influence. And they thought that if I did this,
You were in.
I'm cool.
Yeah.
And I felt cool at the time. You know what I mean? I'm 12 years old, hanging out with guys that are in 16 that have their license and riding around with guys like that seemed cool.
Thought you were ahead of the curve because you were the youngest in the group.
Yeah, absolutely. And then from there, 7th grade, I smoked weed for the first time. Then I started experimenting with pills. And then my 16th birthday is when I tried cocaine for the first time. And then that was kind of it. That's when I started using cocaine on the weekends. And for a long time, like, I played basketball, football, and track, and was good at sports, and I got good grades. So it was kind of easy to
mask it,
hide, for a while.
Because no one would suspect.
Right, because I'm still getting good grades, but, dude, I lived in a town of 6,000 people. Word gets around fast, and I ended up, my senior year, I went to rehab, 18 years old, and I voluntarily went, but I wasn't really ready to quit at that point. It was just that everybody was on my back all the time, wanting me to, they wanted me to go to church and pray and do all these things, and that's when I first kind of started going to church. But I went to rehab, went back, played the senior year of my high school football season, and then went back to the same things.
Meaning the same lifestyle before rehab.
Yes, yeah.
Can I ask you a question? You say that in conjunction with the drug use at an early age, you were still able to facilitate a relatively healthy lifestyle. Multi-sport athlete, getting good grades at school, at least, passing classes and stuff like that. What was the catalyst for these kids to start getting on to you about the drug use? Was it getting to the point where it was starting to affect your life and they were starting to notice the decline, so they were actively trying to help you?
Yeah, absolutely.
And as an 18-year-old kid,
you can only do it for so long. I mean, there's always a couple exceptions. Like, I know some guys that do drugs and can still go to work every day.
Functioning alcoholics. Functioning, yeah.
But
by the way, so do I. I know a bunch of guys.
Me having the addictive personality, like, I'm go big or go home. So it wasn't long before, I was probably doing way more than a person actually should. Okay. Like, if I drank one beer, I'm going to drink 30. And if I drink 30, then I was going to do drugs. And it wasn't going to be like I'm going to home at 3 a.m. It's going to be like 3 days later, you know?
Jesus.
So that can't,
You can't
not
live like
affect
that.
you, you know?
What was the catalyst when you say, when I do things like I go big? I'm trying to dig into that a little bit more because it's kind of like a high level. There's layers to that onion.
Right.
So when you say when I do things I got to go big, I said this off the record, but I'm going to say this on the record. I'm going to ask questions, and by all means, if you don't want to answer them,
Sure.
please don't. What was the home life like? Like, did you have both parents in the household? Do you have siblings? Like, I'm trying to understand, outside of the peer pressure and the influence that you had from the older crowd, what was the direction or what was kind of leading you down this path?
Yeah.
Did you feel good doing these drugs? Like, it was as simple as like, Arion, when I drank, I felt great. So I wanted to feel great all the time.
Right.
It could be that simple. Or was it something like, I had a father who was like super disciplinary and it was like my rebellious phase? Like, I'm trying to understand what was the catalyst for leading you down this path.
I think it was a kind of a combination of all the things you mentioned. My parents got divorced when I was 4. And my mom at that point was dating a guy that was an alcoholic, was abusive.
Physically or just mentally?
Yeah, both.
Both. With you, and forgive me, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
With you, mother, everybody, was he just an asshole?
it was all of us.
All of us. Okay.
Mostly
I'm sorry.
mostly my mother. But it was one of those things that we moved several times, like to try to get away, I guess. But he would come and bring her flowers or something, and then we'd end up in the same spot, you know. We ended up going out to my dad's and staying there. My dad raised us. And growing up, like, my mom was much more lenient on things, much less disciplined than my dad. So I always wanted to live with her.
Because it was easier.
She would let me do a lot more stuff. But my dad was really strict to a degree that I think there was a ton of stuff that I learned from my dad that were great. Maybe a little too strict, but what I took from it, was I always I learned respect, honor, manners. I was always had manners and respected my teachers and my peers and elders. So that was a good thing that I took from my dad. But I think about, like, if that wouldn't have happened, if I wouldn't have been raised by my dad, the person that was a disciplinarian, like, where would I be now? Because I've spent time in prison, jail multiple times, and was raised by my dad. You know what I mean? The disciplinarian.
Imagine what it could have been.
What would have happened?
That's a tough thing to say because, like, there's different strokes for different folks.
Sure.
And I think that a mother and a father have their own place respectively. And I understand, like, the logic that you're trying to use of, like, if this is how I ended up with a person that gave me a little bit more discipline and direction, imagine what I would have been with lesser of that. But, the whole game with the shoulda, woulda, coulda, or what could have been or whatever is we will never know.
Sure. It doesn't matter now.
Because it's ripple effects,
It's still
right?
a thought sometimes.
Yeah,
though,
I'm sure.
I mean?
But,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you would have turned out worse. Maybe you would have turned out better.
Yeah, sure.
Who knows?
Yeah.
It's
logically worse.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
Yeah, but you're right. It's a possibility.
I always look back at my childhood and, like, I look back at, like, the things that gave me scars and the things that healed me as a culmination of the guy that I am today.
Yeah.
Without the peaks and without the valleys, I wouldn't be who I am. So it's like, that whole time travel paradox thing, like, if you go back in time, you can't change anything or you don't know the ripples of it, right? That's how I look at everything else in our lives. Like, everything had to happen, unfortunately and fortunately, the way they did for us to be here today.
Right.
And then I always ask people, like, do you like who you are today? Like, it may have sucked getting here,
Sure.
but did you like the destination?
Yeah, I mean, I can look back at all the things that were tough in my life and see how it shaped and formed me in some way. So there was a lot of positive things or good attributes that came from those struggles, but how do we respond to them? As in, do we use them for the good or for the bad?
Dude.
And for the majority of my life, the gifts that God had given me, I used for evil and not good. You know, from those the guy I was talking about that my mom dated, he's passed away now, but when I was a kid, like in my mind, he was going to end one day by me, you know? And he had 2 kids that were older than me that beat the crap out of me.
And you held a lot of hate towards both of them.
So what, it made me fearless at that point. But everything kind of changed for me where I didn't have any feeling or emotion at all. But I wasn't scared of anything. It was because of those times like that. Which could be a good thing, right? If we use it for good purposes. And I did not use it for good purposes. You know, I was fighting all the time, and then on top of that, drugging and alcohol. So,
what was your father saying? Because you said that you lived with your father, who was the more of the disciplinary. Yeah. What was your father's reaction, or how was your relationship when he became aware of some of your lifestyle choices at a young age? Did he try to double down on the discipline? Did he try to, fix you, quote unquote? Did he try to direct you? What was his reaction, and how did that affect your relationship?
Yeah, I think he tried everything.
Yeah.
You know, he tried to be more strict. But I mean, at some point, like, what really can you do? Like, I was leaving when I wanted to, even though he was telling me not to.
This is your son. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Like,
I think, I hope that I never have to experience that. Like, the stuff that I put my father through. There was one time that, so I had drugs in a duffel bag, and I was in my mom's car, and she dropped me off at my dad's, and I forgot my duffel bag in her car. Well, she went through it and found it, and I realized that I left it there. So I call my mom, hey, bring this bag real quick. So she brings it, but in the meantime, she had called my father. And so I go out to the car, get the duffel bag, walk back in, and my dad's sitting in the garage in a lawn chair. And I got the bag, and I'm like, oh, no, this ain't good. You know what I mean? And
how old were you, out of curiosity?
20 maybe.
Okay. Yeah. So not 16, but a little bit older.
Yeah, 20. Yeah, I was in college. So I walk in, and he's like, hey, I know what you got in the bag. Let's go upstairs and flush it together. And I'm like, no, I ain't doing it. He's like, it was like he was sad crying, but then by the end of that, he was mad, because I wasn't going to do it. So I left, went down to Carbondale where the university is, was staying in a dorm there, and the very next day got popped.
By what?
So there was a party in the dorms, and the RAs came up, and they said I couldn't leave. Well, I was going to leave anyway. I pressed the elevator doors, and the police were on there. And I was drinking already, and I was underage. So they had probable cause to search.
They basically had everything.
Yeah.
Is that, if you don't mind me asking, is that what you ended up going to prison for?
No. So there's a combination of things.
I want to do this story justice, so forgive me if I'm jumping around. It's just that I'm going off of what you're telling me. But it seems like to me you've had a hardened life than what most would think, because you're telling me on the surface, good grades, multi-sport athlete, going to college. Yeah. Everything sounds kosher. Everything sounds like every, high school, college boy. But then on the flip side, at least there seems to be like a life within a life where it's much darker. Right. It's much more substance abuse. And it goes a little bit farther than just having a good time. It goes into the realm of obsession or dependency. when you were going through this, was this at all entering your mind of like, this is bad what I'm doing? Or was this just kind of the status quo lifestyle? Were you cognizant of it?
Not like I am now, but I mean, I knew it was wrong, but I just didn't really care, you know? Guess it was just, I mean, at the time it was fun, exciting. But that only really can only last so long. Yeah. I mean, like, just honestly, like I have no desire to use drugs now. But with that being said, from when I started, the first time I did cocaine to the last time I did it, 2.5 years ago, it wasn't as good. And it's not because the quality, it's because what it's done to my brain, you know? So it eventually, like, it just became a habit where the beginning of my night, I would go out, we'd go out to drink somewhere. I'd have a couple drinks, and then I was going to do a line. And after I did a line, I didn't care about anything else the rest of the night other than doing the cocaine. So I usually go home. So the first line would get you high, and then the rest of the time, the 99% of the rest of the night was terrible. I was paranoid. I thought people were at my house, like, but I continued to do it every weekend. Like, logically, like now when I look back at it, I don't know why you would continue to do that, right? So I'm laying in my bed thinking somebody's outside of my house. And then next weekend do it again.
Meaning
it became a habit rather than enjoyable. It was just a habit of, this is what I do.
Because you did it, you chose to do it, kind of thing. I did this yesterday, I'm gonna do it today.
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally by definition habit.
Yeah.
Can I ask, how did college go for you? Because obviously you got caught with all these other things.
Yeah.
Was that the day? Were you able to? I want to be careful how I ask this because I don't want to come across as disrespectful. Did you ever finish university, or did life have other?
No, I went to college like 5 times, like 5 different colleges. I just didn't really have don't think I really knew what I wanted to do.
Were you going to college because you didn't want to be a loser? Was that like the whole idea?
No, so I was getting recruited for football pretty hard by Big 10 and 12 schools. I played strong safety, and I assumed that I went to a lot of visits. I assumed that I would have probably signed somewhere if it wasn't for me going to rehab. Everybody that was talking to me going into my senior year, I go to rehab for cocaine. Nobody wants me anymore. You know what I mean? Of course.
No, what do you mean, of course?
I mean, somebody that you're recruiting going into their senior year is now going to rehab for drugs.
I think it's a conversation.
Yeah, sure.
You know what I mean? Like, I look at that as more proactive versus reactive.
Yeah,
Good thing he's doing it his senior year of high school, not his freshman year of college under my dime if I'm giving him a scholarship.
Right. Well, that's a good way to look at it.
Maybe. Listen, I'm not a college recruiter.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll all tell me, like, hey, you're an idiot.
Yeah. So and then I ended up going to Lindenwood. Or I went to McKendree for a while, played football there, and then ended up partying, doing the same things. Ended up back at community college in Southern Illinois. And then I went to Lindenwood where I met my oldest son's mother. And it's funny because, DuQuoin, the school that I went to, didn't have wrestling. But my oldest son's mother is a 3-time state champ women's wrestling in the state of Florida. So she was at Lindenwood Belleville wrestling, and I met her. So then I started going to wrestling practice with the boys just because I was doing MMA. And the coach came up to me. He's like, "Hey, man, I'll give you some money if you want to wrestle."
No shit. Yeah. Like a walk-on scholarship.
Yeah. So I wrestle. I'm 1-0 as a cleat.
Big undefeated, brother.
Yeah, 1-0. And then Ezra's mom got pregnant, so that was the end of mine. I was back
Also
out
by
of-
the end of her career.
Back out of college. Yeah.
Damn, brother.
Yeah.
You know what? It'd be like that sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I ask what the catalyst was to get into MMA? Obviously, you're going through this tumultuous, like, early youth, right?
Yeah.
What was, because, by the way, so you're 4 years older than me. It means you graduated high school, what, 2007 or 2008?
Yeah.
2007. Yeah. So 2007 was like a different time in MMA, right?
Yeah.
It was by no means mainstream like it is now. There was a lot of people that had no idea what the UFC were or mixed martial arts at all. What was the catalyst for you to get into MMA? And walk me through the, like, was it you walked into a gym? Did you get into a fight and someone noticed you? Did you go to a fight and you're like, what is this?
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand how you got into MMA.
So I always loved fighting, even when I was a kid. I loved to fight.
Did you get into fights?
Yeah. But it wasn't like, I mean, so I got in fights to get in fights, but I would also fight my best friend, and I just enjoyed fighting. Like, I could fight my best friend and then still be best friends. You know what I mean? I just enjoyed it.
Welcome to MMA.
So
all my best friends have hit me in the face multiple times.
So I kind of just fought my entire life, but street fights, nothing. I wasn't trained in anything. And then I was in college, and I came back. My dad coached football at DuQuoin, where I went to high school, and I would come back because football is pretty big where I'm from. So I'd come back to the local Friday night football games. And I came back, and I went to, you probably know Colton Cole.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we went to the same high school. We went to
No
the same
shit.
school. Yeah.
Small world.
Yeah. So we went to the same school, and I ran into him in the end zone, watching a game. And so Colton was like, he played all the sports that I did, but he was average. He wasn't great. I'm just being honest, dude.
Colton's gonna watch it like,
listen,
fuck
hey,
you.
I would tell Colton that he was good at track. He was a good shot putter and discus thrower. All right, I give him that. But I'm just being honest. I would tell him.
I'm gonna have him on the podcast. He'll be like, listen, Garrett, average. Everything he did.
Well, anyways, so I run into him, and he tells me he's 4-0 or something as an amateur MMA fighter, because I hadn't seen him, and I'm like, come on, dude.
I'll take it.
Like, I beat you up right now. You know what I mean? And he's like, well, he had been training. He actually had been training some boxing and jiu-jitsu and stuff like that. And he's like, come over to my house next week, and we'll spar around. And I went over, and he didn't whoop my ass, but he beat me.
Yeah, he put it to you.
He beat me. Like, on a judge's scorecard, he beat me, and I was tired, and it wasn't like a street fight.
Oh, I'm sure if you've never done MMA before, and you're going in there with certain expectations, within the first 30 seconds, you're like, what the fuck? What's all this grappling?
Yeah,
what
it wasn't like what I thought it was. And there's a high percentage, I can't remember what it is, of people who fight in a cage once, never do it again. Because it's not like you thought it was going to be.
No. That's a great, I never thought about that, but I would not refute that.
Yeah.
Because my first cage fight, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
There was I thought of how it was going to be, and I trained like maybe 2 or 3 months before that. And then what it ended up being, I was like, that was not at all
I really
reality.
think all my fights were like that. It was like, my first one, the adrenaline was different, but then none of them went how I thought they were. Like, dang, this dude looks like garbage on film, but dang, he just grabbed a hold of me. He's kind of strong,
That's a great fucking way to look at that, dude. It gives me a certain humble, like, whenever I watch fights now, I have to actively, like, hold back or, like, reserve myself whenever I'm watching with people that have never fought, because they'll say shit that just irritates me.
Yeah.
They'll say, like, this guy's already tired in the second round. I'm like, that fucker's got a world-class guy in front of him. Forgive him if he's a little gassed. It's like, it's interesting to me how that perspective shift has also shifted the perspective that I have when I watch the sport. Because now I'm like, when I first was watching fights, I was that guy. I'd be like, come on, dude, are you fucking kidding me? Like 2 minutes into the first round.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, man, he probably had an adrenaline dump because he was shitting his pants in the back.
I remember watching, I think it was I'm not 100%, but it was WEC, and my dad had it playing on the TV, and I think it was Aldo and Faber.
Oh my God!
And
That was
did
the one
they
and
fight
only
in WEC?
They fought in WEC, but
Yeah.
that was the one and only pay-per-view they had.
Okay,
Aldo
that's
versus
where
Faber.
he was smoking his leg. Over
Dude.
and over. Yes, that was it.
Dude, insane. Did you see his legs after that
Yeah,
fight?
they were like,
like
a
beat sausages.
Yeah.
Oh my
So,
God.
I was watching that fight, and I remember seeing Aldo kick Uriah Faber and tell my dad, he couldn't hit me with those kicks. Like,
You telling your dad that?
Yeah, dude, he couldn't hit me with those
Leg kicks don't
There's
work, Dad.
way. And then like 2 months later, Colton Cole beat me up. You know what I mean? And then I was like, yeah.
Maybe he would've.
Okay, he would have hit me with those kicks. But I always had like, the fighter mentality for me was like, look, if I saw Khabib on film, like film is hard. If I saw Khabib on film, like, yeah, he's good, but I'm going to beat him. You know what I mean?
But that's the mentality you have to be.
Yeah.
Listen, to be a successful fighter, to be a fighter, to be anything in competition with martial arts, if you're watching something and you're thinking to yourself like, "Ooh, I don't know if I could take that guy," or anything, not the sport for you.
Yeah.
You need a healthy amount of ego.
Yeah.
You need to be able to
Yeah.
watch that shit because you're going to be the one going in there. You can't go in there thinking to yourself, I hope I'm strong enough. I hope I'm fast enough. I hope. Are you kidding me? Every fight, I agreed with you when you were said like, you know, I always had this idea of how the fight was going to go, and then it never turned out to be like exactly what I thought.
Sure.
Same.
Yeah.
Because I always went in there with this like unwavering.
Yeah, like, I'm knocking him out in 30 seconds.
Hit him with some shit. Don't get hit with some shit. Walk away with cash. That was the game plan, right?
And it
then I'd
always seemed like my punches were slow. Like
my
nothing
God.
like in sparring or anything like that. Like, why is my punch so slow?
It's comfort. I've talked with many fighters. It's 100% comfort.
Yeah.
It's the anxiety of the moment. And that's why I say, how many guys do you know look like absolute world beaters in the gym?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, they're just
Absolutely.
crushing it
Yeah.
on the mitts, on the bag, and sparring.
Yeah.
Then you see them in fight night,
Yeah.
and they absolutely, consistently
Right.
shit the bed.
Right.
You're like, dude, what is going on?
Yeah.
It's the
But then I've also seen guys that
the opposite.
yes,
Well, they
like,
look
I'm
like-
like beating the crap out of them in the gym, and then I go watch them fight for the Bellator championship.
You're
know?
like, Jesus
dude,
Christ,
remember
brother.
Daniel Strauss?
Yes.
Dude, he was that. It was him, dude. Like in the gym, but he's also one of those guys. Like, I don't think he'll care that I say this, but and we used to do blow together, and he would, dude. We would be up for like 3 days, and then he would go to a jiu-jitsu tournament and win like the next day. Like he hadn't slept and go to a jiu-jitsu tournament. I'd be like hiding in my bed under the covers.
Here's
you know?
the unsexy reality of it, man, is like some guys are just motherfuckers.
Yeah.
Look at John Jones.
Yeah.
He's like the poster child of like sometimes you can get away with it.
Yeah.
You can be so great both mentally and physically and overcome such hurdles
Yeah.
that the famous quote that he had against Daniel Cormier where he's like, I did a fucking week of blow and beat your ass.
Yeah.
Dude, how do you return? Like, what could you possibly
Right.
say
Yeah.
to John Jones
Yeah.
telling you that
there's
he didn't
not
even-
many of those guys, but there are some.
But there are
Yeah.
some. Now,
Yeah.
does the exception make the rule?
Sure.
No.
Yeah.
But there is an exception.
Yeah.
And by the way, dude, you know, I want to be careful how I say this because obviously I don't know your lived experience. And I would venture to say you probably went harder than I did. We all, I wish I could sit here and tell you that all of us were like disciplined and stuff like that.
Sure.
It just was not the case.
Sure.
I can't say that I ever did it in camp. That's why that was so wild when you said that. Because for me, the clear delineation was like, okay, fight camp, discipline. Time to go, boys.
Right.
And then afterwards, we would party hard.
Yeah,
you know what
well,
I
I
mean?
would be more disciplined, just not,
As
I'm only going out on Friday instead of Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I mean, that's just the truth.
Listen, all things in moderation.
But the thing is like, I didn't realize how much it affected me until I got sober, right? So I could use on a Friday, and I'm still not right until Wednesday, and then Friday I'm doing it again.
Well, can I ask you this question? And it might seem a little obtuse, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How much of it do you also think was like a mental crutch? John Jones, when he was on JRE, said that a lot of times the reason he would go on these benders and stuff like that was it was kind of like a mental handicap he was setting for himself. So that if he ever did lose, he could turn back and say, well, you know what? I lost not because the guy was a better man, not because he caught me or whatever, but because I was doing blow for a week. Like, he's not the better guy.
Yeah.
He was like a built-in handicap
Yeah.
he was building in for himself. That doesn't seem like this was for you.
No.
But what I'm trying to say is, because this was the status quo, do you feel like a part of you did it because it kept you at like that equilibrium? This is all you know. This is normal for you.
Yeah.
So to not do it would have actually affected you more at that time.
Man, I don't know. It's hard to answer.
I know it's a loaded question.
Yeah. I don't,
Because you wouldn't have known.
Yeah, but I wish I wouldn't have, you know? I mean, because really, I mean, like I half-assed my career. Regardless of if I was using on the weekends, I still went as hard as I could in the gym, but it wasn't up to my potential of if I wouldn't have went out on Friday night. You know, my body wasn't recovered properly. My mind wasn't the way that it's created to be when you just did 22 lines of cocaine and God damn. I'm just
Woo!
But
I mean this is a compliment. What an animal.
yeah, it was
Do you,
but I love that type of lifestyle, just like the craziness of it, you know.
you're an adrenaline junkie, maybe?
That was like one of the things that I felt some type of edge from, some type of power from, I guess. And that kind of goes back to the things that I talked about earlier, where God has given you these gifts. How are you going to use it? You know what I mean? That type of thought process and adrenaline and that type of wiring can be used for good things. But this was not the case. I used it for the incorrect purposes.
I have a buddy who's a psychologist and a therapist.
Yeah.
And he said that trauma can either dull a blade or can sharpen it.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
A lot of people
That's
can
good.
have some sort of trauma, and they'll use that as fuel.
Sure.
They'll be like, well, this happened to me. I'm going to make sure it never happens again. Some people, something traumatic can happen to them, and it can just cripple them.
Stay in it. Yeah.
Now they're like, this is my new norm, and this is what I am.
Yeah.
And it's funny because when I asked him, I was like, well, what's like the clear delineation? Like, is there any sort of characteristics that coincide with using trauma as a fuel and not? And he's like, dude, I've seen the alpha of the alphaist alpha male crumble, and I've seen, you know, like a 90-pound girl that you'd think would succumb to it.
Sure.
Use that as fuel. He's like, he goes, I'm not doing a good job, so I'm just gonna kind of say it the way I remember it. I'm not trying to like quote him, but he was essentially saying like, flip a coin.
Right.
Flip a coin, like on every,
sure.
and that's the tough part, because it's like, if you could delineate like a clear mental capacity that could kind of make things to where traumatic experiences could be 100% used as fuel.
Sure.
Well, then you'd want to like maximize that, because you're going to have traumatic, like
Right.
everyone is going to have something happen to them.
Yeah.
Whether it's man-made,
Sure.
whether it's a gift by God in many ways, what have you. Well, then obviously you'd want to always make sure that that's a positive outcome on you.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And sometimes things can be both. I say this all the time. So when my mom died, it was like simultaneously the thing that turned me into a man, because it's like, okay, like the one woman that loved me. I've never experienced love like my mother's since that, like truly chose us over her. And now that I have a daughter, I kind of understand why.
Sure.
But since, right? And then I use her death simultaneously as a means to push myself, because it's what she would have wanted.
Right.
But that also means I've pushed myself to do things that I didn't want to do because I knew she would have wanted me to do it. So it's like, is that a good thing? Somewhat. I got through college because of it.
Right.
If my mom didn't pass, I would have never graduated university. So maybe it's a good thing.
Sure.
But then I also, you know, decided to stop fighting after a while, because I knew that my mom would have wanted me to lead a certain lifestyle.
Sure.
So I don't think any of us truly know, but I don't think that anyone can pass judgment on that either. So like, things will happen to you or things will happen to me, and the way we react to them is solely on our behalf.
Yep.
Be damned everybody else's opinion, because they don't understand. I could have had the same childhood that you had, and we could have done completely separate ends of that spectrum.
I mean, my sister did, and she didn't drink until she didn't drink alcohol till her 21st birthday. You know?
What's your relationship like with her?
Well, so I have one full-blooded sister, then I have two half-sisters and a half-brother. But
So
I'm
4
close.
siblings in total.
Yeah, I have my full-blooded sister. I'm still close with. She lives about 45 minutes from me.
Older or younger, if you don't mind me asking?
She's 2 years younger than me.
So are you the oldest of all the?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're the.
Yeah.
Does that weigh on you?
No, I don't think so. There's certain things that happened that I wish maybe I could have stopped, like to protect my sister. Things that when I was young, but I was going to take care of that, which I mentioned that earlier. In my head, I was anyway.
Was he physically abusive with her too?
He wasn't. Not that I know. But I mean, there are some things that happen that shouldn't.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right, dude. That's man, it's crazy because like we go back and I tell you that I stand on the word of God and what it says, and like I said, all things work together for the good. And sometimes like God knows what's good for us, and it's hard to say like going through that was good, right? You know what I mean? But God knows best for us, and we have finite minds. And if I use an analogy, like if I take my daughter to, depending on what the shot is, right? I take her to the doctor because she's sick and they're going to give her a shot. And she's sitting next to me and the doctor comes in with this needle and tells her to get ready because he's going to stick it in her leg. And she's like, Dad, no. Like, Dad, you're supposed to protect me. You love
technically
me.
not
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah, right? You're supposed to protect me. But I'm doing it for her good, right? And that's how God is to us. His ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. Just like my daughter's thoughts are not my thoughts. She doesn't know right now that I'm doing it for her good. And
Garrett, while I first of all, I love this conversation. I spoke about my faith with Evan Elder in 2 good episodes, in my opinion. And I'll ask you this question, and I want you to know that it is not to question your faith. It is to just ask a great philosophical question.
yeah,
That is easy to say when the outcome of that test turns out to be a positive. But then there are instances in this world where it just seems fucked up.
no, I agree 100%.
Children with cancer at age
Absolutely,
of 1, right?
yeah.
Or, a family of 4 get hit in a car accident. And like, I've always subscribed to the God works in mysterious ways because I've seen it happen in my life. And I've seen the tests that I've been given, thus overcoming them, create the man I am. So I agree with that. But it is simultaneously very tough to sell that to someone where the outcome of that test was a fail to them.
Right. Well, I wouldn't say that I'm trying to sell it.
Forgive
You know
me,
what I mean?
that's a poor
Like,
choice of words.
Right,
I guess what I'm trying to say is it's difficult.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of stuff.
There's a lot of people that hate God.
There's
for
a
the
lot of
tests.
things. Yeah, sure.
Myself included. When my mom died, 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Fuck this, fuck that.
Yeah.
Greatest woman I knew, never smoked, never drank.
Right.
She's the one that gets cancer.
I think, the things like that you brought up with, a family of 4 getting killed in a car crash or children with cancer, we don't understand those things, right?
Like, what's that purpose?
But knowing that, God created the earth in 6 days, and then I'm going to question him on, you know what I mean? I don't think I can. Even though I don't know the reasoning, I'm sure that he knows better than me.
So,
But I do think like anybody would wrestle with that. I think most Christians would wrestle with things like kids with cancer.
So I go back to, because I ask myself this all the time. My faith is progressing.
Sure.
As I get older, as I start to experience more of life and the different stages of it, I start to realize the synchronicity or like the beauty of it. Mm-hmm. It makes sense why certain things are the way they are. And I spend a lot of time to like kind of ponder and think about that. I think that's one of the things that our generation, or like our society is kind of missing is like that alone time to just sit and think.
Yep.
Right. And sometimes that can be through prayer. Sometimes that can be through meditation, what have you. I like to sit down and fucking think about various topics. Why are we mortal? Makes sense in the grand scheme of things. If we were immortal, we would not see the beauty in the life that we have as it is. It is only through our mortality that we choose others over ourselves because we are finite creatures. I have such a love for my daughter that I would choose her above me. Absolutely. The only creature on this planet that I would choose above me because I know it'll be the one thing that will outlive me, that is me.
Sure.
Part of me is forever in her. And she will walk this earth long after I'm away from it. And there's a beauty to that. There's like a beauty in immortality. So like it kind of, as I get older, the death of my mother becomes easier and easier for me to kind of understand. Whereas when it first happened with the knowledge that I had, I was like, what the fuck? Like, what is the lesson in this?
Sure.
Simultaneously, I actually think it's good to question it. Because I don't think blind faith is good faith. I think you should have those inclinations. I think they're human. Okay, if God is all-knowing and all-powerful, then he made me in his image.
Yes.
All sin intact as it is on purpose.
Yes.
So all of these things that I wrestle with, once again, if he is a perfect being, or she, this is on purpose.
Yes.
So I think to myself, all things will lead back to faith. Like, even if I hate God, or even if I'm angry at God, or even if I don't understand God, or any of these things, it'll simultaneously lead back to this was the path, regardless if I believe or not. Does that make sense?
I think. Well, so Philippians 1:6.
Because if I don't believe, and God's all-powerful and all-knowing, was it not his intention for me to not believe?
Yeah, it would be.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like whenever I sit here and think about religion or faith and all these other things, I think to myself, I'll give you a prime example because to me, religion is both the answer and the hypocrisy at the same time. It's both. It's like we tell each other that like live and let live, but if someone doesn't live a certain lifestyle, we say it's heresy. We say that, love thy neighbor, but if your neighbor's gay, like what happens there? Like there are so many circumstances where life and the progression of humanity and society just doesn't align with the Bible. But then there are tenets.
That's pastor's problem.
Fair, but then there are tenets that are above all, right?
It's all of our problem, but it stems from leaders
who what speak the word.
Distort the gospel and is telling a false gospel.
Can you go into that?
I mean, you got guys like Joel Osteen.
The mega churches.
I do think that there's like a stigma, like mega churches are bad, and I think like they can get diluted really easy, right? And they become a business, but planes that land safely don't make the news either. You know what I mean? So I think that there's probably some mega churches where they love Jesus and they preach the word and they're doing what God has commanded them to do, but we only hear about the ones that are having the scandals and the money problems along,
Well, there's two ways to look at it. A mega church also has the biggest microphone. Yeah. So like, are they making money? Is there a profit margin?
Sure. There's always going to be
they're reaching more people. So also a good thing.
Yeah. I think like in those churches, like you're going to have a group of true believers. You know what I mean? But
they're going to do more good than they do bad.
What they're being fed is questionable.
Do you think that? I have two questions for you. I'm going to ask them in succession, but first one first. Do you think that religion and how we've kind of as a society have kind of strayed from religion and kind of catered more towards monetary or physical things, do you think that is a part and parcel the degradation of society?
100%. I don't think there's any doubt about it. If you go back and look at, I think it was, I might get these mixed up, but 1962, 1963, that's when, I can't remember the case, but you couldn't pray in school anymore. And then, so you can pray in school if it's like an extracurricular, like FCA or something like that, an after school program. But, there's guys like that are kneeling in prayer and then getting fired for praying because there's some I can't remember.
Separation of church and state.
Yeah,
and
it's
like
something
federal.
like that. But 1962, either
Can you Google that real quick, Tony? Forgive me.
prayer, and then 63 was Bible reading. Like you couldn't read the Bible in
And they were
class.
taking that away from what?
From education.
public education?
Yes. So you, if you look,
Can you look that up? 1962, 1963, removal of prayer. Forgive me.
yeah, no, you're good.
landmark case, Engel versus Battalion.
Angle versus Battalion. What was the outcome?
Decisions ruled religious activity in public schools, such as two cases. So yeah, 1962 and 1963. That while organized prayer led by officials in schools banned students are allowed to pray privately or join a religious club after school.
Interesting.
Supreme Court cases.
Interesting.
Yeah, and
So there, it's not that they can, it's that they are no longer able to.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And they sued.
And I'm assuming it's because of the separation of church and
And
state.
they sued the school districts for First Amendment, but they ruled for the school districts.
Wow.
So if you look at go to 1962 and look at the disciplinary problems in school at the time. It's like chewing gum, cutting in line, talking without raising your hand, and then go 10 years later after prayer and Bible is taken out of school. It's like assault, sexual abuse, alcohol abuse. You know what I mean? Like in 10 years, regardless of if you were a religious person or not, you would look at those two things and be like, all right, we have to go back to what we did before.
Data is data. Impartial, non-political. This is what's happening. This is the trajectory. I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I meant more like, it's funny that you say that, so maybe it's a catalyst for a lot longer than I thought, but I just meant like the last 15, 20 years. I'm seeing a growing number of men and women coming to faith, coming to religion, whether that's Christianity or whether that's Islam or whether that's Judaism. For me and my inner circle, it seems to be much more Christianity, but to each their own, whatever, path you want to,
Yeah.
God told me to love my neighbor and I'm going to continue to do that. So I'm noticing this anecdotally, like people are starting to basically crave, I want to say meaning or direction or purpose.
Yeah.
Purpose is a great word. So, and I think it's a direct correlation to the degradation of society. Now, whether that was what came first, the chicken or the egg, is like, did society degrade because we don't have religion, or because of the degradation of religion, degradation of society, we didn't have religion, whichever one it is. But I'm noticing that when people don't have a family, when people don't have money, when people don't have all these things, like the last thing they kind of like are finding purpose in is in God, is in religion. It gives them a place of common interests with individuals, gives them that social need because they're going to church, a Bible study, what have you. It gives them that networking that they need. There seems to be a correlation between going to some sort of religious activity and a positive trajectory in your life, possibly from networking, possibly from this, what have you. It makes sense. And I think, I think one of the things I think about is like long and hard about society and like, how would I be able to strengthen it and how would I go about destroying it? First thing I would do is break up the home.
Sure.
Second thing I would do is eliminate purpose. Give people like, this is it. There's nothing after this.
Distraction.
So do everything that you can to make this time as good as you can for yourself. So don't be selfless. Don't act in the service of others. Do everything for yourself. Be greedy. Be this. That's why I have that. Of the 7 deadly sins, greed, in my opinion, is like the most interesting to me. So I don't know. I guess the question I'm having for you is, I'm seeing this in real time in my inner circles, people kind of flocking towards religion. And I see this in conjunction with myself becoming a little bit more faithful, I can't say that it's going from church or anything like that. It's all lived experience. The more I see, the more it makes sense.
Yeah.
The less reasons I have not to believe.
We've gotten so far away from God. Things are going to happen like that. The family's going to break up. You're going to see divorces. You're going to see the things that you're seeing now. And that just goes back to 62, 63. That's evidence there.
Do you think it's by design?
By design, as in, the Bible says that the enemy is out to kill, steal, and destroy. And that's exactly what he's doing. And if you don't know what God says about how you should do this, I mean, obviously you're gonna have believers or non-believers, but Hosea 4:6 says, "For my people will be destroyed for a lack of knowledge." So if you don't know, your lack of knowledge is the word of God. So if I don't know what God says, I'm gonna just fill it in with however I feel. Jeremiah 17:9 says, "The heart is deceitfully wicked above all things. Who can understand it?" So you get like this Disney theology, like follow your heart, follow your heart, follow your heart. You know where following my heart got me?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Not in good places.
No, follow the word of God and what he says. Don't follow what you think. Now, maybe what you think aligns with, I'm going to the scriptures and seeing, look, does this align with God's word? If not, I'm going to seek, I'm going to go to my pastor. I'm going to seek guys who, one of my favorite proverbs says, "He who walks with wise men will be wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm." So you want to be a wise man, go walk with wise men. So I would seek counsel on those decisions. But following my heart got me in a lot of trouble.
What would you say, and this is the second part of that question, is what would you say to the people that their main criticism of religion is the simultaneous hypocrisy of it? And I suffer from this myself, you know. In so his image we were created, and God wanted us to not do anything to our bodies because we were created in his image. Yet I sit here with tattoos.
Right.
You have tattoos. I've done less than reputable things in my lifetime.
Sure.
Do I deserve that
Right.
repentance or
Yeah.
that forgiveness? You know, a lot of people, whenever they're talking about religion, they'll be like, well, Garrett did drugs
Sure.
and this all stuff.
Sure.
Now it's easy for him to talk about God, and I find it hard to dispute this inquiry, because you're like, yeah, you're kind of right. Like, I did do a lot of fucked up things. I did, you know, kind of, I want to say blasphemous acts, right?
Yeah.
So you're not incorrect in saying that, like, I did the things that my heart desired,
Right.
and now it's easy for me to say, like, hey, don't do that, because I had already done it. And this is like a coin of phrase, but it's like abstinence does not seem to be
So
the answer.
what I would say to that is, one with the hypocrisy thing is, we are, the only perfect person was Jesus Christ. So we all are hypocrites. I'm a hypocrite. You're a hypocrite. My wife's a hypocrite. Like, in some way, like, we're hypocritical.
We're all flawed creatures.
You know what I'm saying? And that's exactly why we need Jesus. That's exactly why we need a savior. Somebody who died for our sins, because we're imperfect, you know? What else did you say?
Essentially, that the main criticism is it is easy for us to say this after the life
Okay.
we've lived of sin.
It's
It's not like we chose this life from the get-go.
Yeah. I never, I didn't plan on stopping drinking or using drugs. I woke up one morning and I went out to Nashville, did coke, and I woke up the next morning and hated it. I wasn't going to AA. I wasn't going to NA. It was different. It was different. Like, I had the same bottle of tequila sitting in the refrigerator that I opened every single day for a year and a half before I moved back to Illinois. And when I looked at it, it made me sick. Like, there's not any other explanation than Christ, than God. That I woke up and that desire had completely gone. Because you can't do that by yourself. You can, but not like that. Not like that. And then continue to have...
Is that how you stopped? Just overnight, one day, it was like...
I did cocaine the night before. I woke up the next morning and I was like, I'm done. I'm done. And I mean, my testimony is God. You know what I mean? Like, I can't say, like, man, I was going to AA and I was doing these things. Like, so I am cautious, right? I don't hang out with the same people
Of
that I
course.
used to. I went to some Celebrate Recoveries. That's faith-based, things like that. But God took those desires from me. You know what I mean?
Did you think it was God at the time, or like you woke up and you're like, this ain't hitting like it used to? I'm not having the same urges
No,
that I used to.
like, to me, it was apparent. It was obvious.
Divine intervention.
Yeah, that. So I knew that I should quit, but in my head I wasn't going to. I had no plan on stopping. You know, And man, dude, it changed my life because after a couple months of sobriety, like I didn't know how much it affected me, like my brain, my mind, my decisions, my judgments. Even if I wasn't like actively using, like it might be a week later, but I still wouldn't make the same decisions as if I would have been sober for the entire week, you know? And
Did it shock you?
I would have to, you know, lay around 3 days or so to recover. So when I got sober, I went to the gym like twice as much. I read like twice as much. I had better conversations, like literally every single thing that I did. I thought I was like, man, I'm getting smarter. And so it wasn't because of sobriety, like actual physically quitting drinking, even though I felt like, man, I'm getting smarter. It was
No, I think there's
there's
something to that, though.
There is something to that, but
I mean, alcohol is
sure,
it's a toxic
Yeah.
chemical. You know what I mean?
but I read, you know, I was into things that I'm passionate about much more. I was in scripture much more, apologetics, certain philosophy, logic, things like that I had passion for, that now I'm reading, you know, 10 pages a day to 50, you know, because I had the time and I didn't need to lay around and sulk and recover, you know.
There's something to that, right? It's like the efficiency bias. It's like the more efficient I am, the more I can do, the more efficient I become.
Right, absolutely. But it made me a better husband, a better father, a better son, a better friend.
Do you mind if I ask, you know, you have kids and you've had different marriages or different relationships in them.
Yeah.
Do you think that your drug use, I don't want to ask why they didn't work out, because I'm not trying to get into the...
Well, you can if you want. It was.
Well, I don't want to know the nuance of the relationship.
sure.
Right? That's
Yeah.
personal.
I mean, it was.
And that's that woman's story too.
Sure.
My question is more towards like, did you feel like the drug use and coupled with fighting was just not conducive to a healthy relationship, and that you were trying to force something that was probably not going to be able to work
So
out?
I would mainly contribute out of that. I would say drugs and alcohol. You know, so I think that you could fight and be sober and still make a relationship work, but with drugs and alcohol on top, it's much harder because your brain is not the same. Like, I'm
Did
not
these women
gonna
try to get you off? I mean, obviously you're in a relationship with them, so they're intimate with you. They understand the inner workings of your life. I'm sure they could see this.
Yeah,
What was
absolutely.
the
I mean,
conversations like? Like,
so one started doing it with me.
oh no.
Yeah. So both. I mean, I would say both. The other one, man, dude, women just want to be loved. You know what I mean? That's what they want. And one of the biggest regrets that I have as a human is how I treated women. Especially being a Christian, God calls you to be the leader, and it says that the woman reflects the man. So my job, the responsibility falls on my shoulders on it, everything really. Like the problem with the world is weak men.
I
The
agree.
downfall of weak men. So the downfall of men and having weak men in positions and fathers and husbands is why we're at where
or
we're at.
absence of fathers and husbands.
Yeah, right. So which would fall in the same, you know, the same thing there. So I did not lead the way that God commands me to lead, and I also lack knowledge of how He says to lead. You know, thankfully He brought me out of that and put me around men that pointed me towards Christ, and got me in the Word. And you know, he who walks with wise men will be wise. Guys that have been walking with the Lord for years and years and have successful marriages and good parents and those type of things.
Your lifestyle, I'm sure, was not lost on anybody at the gym whenever you would go to train for your fights. Did you ever have an instance where like a coach was trying to talk to you about it, or your fellow gym mates? I'm trying to understand, because for this to occur, either a lot of people have to turn a cheek to you, Were there any
Yeah,
circumstances at the gym where guys came up to you and said, "Brother, what are you doing? Like, you could be so much greater than what you are today."
Yeah, no, I didn't. And to be honest with you, I don't know if it would have changed anything, but I still wish somebody would have.
Yeah.
Right. Even like certain things that I did, claiming Jesus Christ. I'm like wearing a cross tattoo or wearing a cross necklace and got a cross tattoo, but I'm going out to sleep with women that aren't my wife and use drugs. You know what I mean? So I wish somebody would have been like, yeah, I don't know if it would have changed anything, but the right thing would be like, hey, dude, Garrett, you claim that you're a follower of Christ. Like this contradicts what his word says, how you should live, how you should behave as a follower, you know? And Proverbs says open rebuke is better than love carefully concealed. So me rebuking you as in because you've claimed to be a follower, like in love, like, hey man.
No, it's
You know
out
what I
of
mean?
yeah. That's what I
Like,
meant.
yeah.
Like they care about you,
Yeah,
brother.
so
What
dude,
are
I
you
think
doing?
people think
I'm
that-
speaking because I
Sure.
want to see you do better.
Right.
Not like put you in your place, bitch. You know what I mean? Nothing like
I think
that.
people just ignored it. Really.
Do you think it's
I
because
don't know. Like, I mean, a lot. Like, I don't want to say this. Like, people were scared of me, and
That's what I was gonna say.
And I wasn't mean. I just think like people thought like that maybe I would fight him or something because I know like later on that people had told me that, but in my head like I never did anything that would be an indicator like if you confronted me that I was gonna fight you.
or maybe people outside of the gym or something didn't say something to you because they were worried that maybe or they thought that was a part and parcel with the lifestyle.
Sure.
Oh well, of course he's gonna go out and party. So he's a
Right.
fighter.
Sure.
He's a fucking
Yeah.
meathead.
Right.
Trust me, I've had people
Yeah,
tell
yeah.
me things.
Absolutely.
When me and Bruna first started dating, until people realized that I was like educated, quote unquote, when
Right.
Bruna, because she was an engineer, when she would tell him like, oh yeah, my boyfriend or
Yeah.
he's a professional fighter, dude,
Yeah.
all her colleagues at work are like,
Yeah.
what the fuck? You know what I
Sure.
mean? And then I had to like kind of be like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm actually a pretty cool guy. Like, get to know me. But like their first inclination was like, who the fuck is this kid?
Yeah.
Well, it's weird, right? Because like I want to say I'm sorry that you had to go through all this, but it goes back to the thing that we were saying earlier of, it's all by design, and you had to have those values.
Really, 99, maybe more, 99% of the problems that I had were created by me. So I don't want anybody to say sorry because it's on me. So for me, what I do now is try to instill those things, those failures for my children not to do,
That's a great segue, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I'm fascinated by this transition now from fighter to father. Not that you haven't been a father before, but with the absence of fighting, you're now given a much clearer perspective on fatherhood, right? You don't necessarily have some of this noise. You have decided to homeschool your children, and I'm fascinated by that decision because I have a daughter, and we've thought about public school, private school. There's also like some other type of schooling that's more like for actual like career trajectory and stuff like that, preschool, what have you, right? It never dawned on me to possibly homeschool my kid simply because I don't know if I could do that well. I have so many questions regarding it, from everything from like curriculum to you have 3 kids, a girl, 2 boys, different age ranges. So like, how do you differentiate who learns what, when, how? First, let's start with this. What was the thought process to start homeschooling your kids? Like, what was the catalyst for that? Like, no more.
Well, first off, before I say anything about it, I want to say that I think I don't agree with public school, but I do think it is good for some kids. As in sometimes that may be the only safe place that they'll be. That's what I mean by that.
Or at the very least, it's better than nothing. It's better than no education.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm
It's
with
better
you.
than nothing. So as parents, we're supposed to be the greatest influences on our kids, specifically fathers. that comes from Scripture. Now, if you would go back and look, like even in history here, but even in not like tribal areas, like you don't see kids being with kids. Very, very rarely will you see kids being with kids. You see kids being with men, a boy being with a man, and a girl being with a woman. Why? Because you don't become a man hanging out with boys. You become a man being trained by men.
Mentored.
Right.
It's in the word.
Foolishness, Proverbs, foolishness is 22:6, I think. Foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. Right? So we're born fools. I mean, you have a daughter. I have kids. Like, dude, you're like, what? Like,
Brother, I was a kid up until like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Why are you laughing? Relax.
So, if foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child, and he who walks with wise men will be wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm, then why would you take a fool and put it with a bunch of other fools? That's public school. And if you can't pray in school and you can't read the Bible in school, that's Antichrist. You're Antichrist. If I can't go in and pray, look, I don't care if there's a Muslim or a Jew or a Hindu, like they should be able to
Practice their religion however they want.
whoever they want to.
I thought we had the freedom of it.
Yeah.
That's why that's such a shock to me. I didn't know about this.
I don't know about that because we have a lot of like Muslim kids at our school and like they'll leave class at certain times of periods of the day
To do the prayers.
Yeah.
because they have to pray
5 times a day. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And they'll leave class and they'll be able to go pray. So
Yeah, but it's not in class.
it's not in class.
Yeah.
they have to
They
leave class.
they
So
wouldn't let them do it in class,
They go
which
to a room.
I mean,
That,
I understand.
kind of makes sense because, you know.
But that's not the reason that it happened.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
it was
It's a byproduct,
because
but
people
not the
hated
source.
God. You know what I mean? The public education, like, okay, if a kid going to school for 8 hours a day, right? So that's a long time, all right? 8 hours a day.
5 days a week.
Let's say you probably sleep 8 hours a day. There's 24 hours a day. That's already 16. An average American kid is on technology 3 hours a day. So now you're up to 19. What if they play a sport? That's another
2 or 3.
right? So you're up to like 21 or 22. So how are you raising your kid?
Yeah.
You're not. Somebody else is.
More importantly, not to piggyback too hard off of this.
Yeah.
Because I also don't agree with public school.
Yeah.
For a majority of reasons. It's kind of sad to say too, because me and my wife are products of public school.
Sure, me
So
too.
in a lot of ways, like all my successes are in conjunction with, but
Right.
I don't think I necessarily like the trajectory it's going in.
Right.
I don't necessarily think. I don't understand why school is 8 hours.
No,
if
me
not,
either.
if not to simulate corporate work life. And if you go back to the creation of the public school system, it was not done as a means for, you know, America to essentially educate its populace to become the greatest nation on the face of the earth. It was, you know, I hate to say it, but like Henry Ford in pushing the Model T, the
Yeah,
Ford Model
absolutely.
T, contacted and basically funded the preliminary public education system in order to create a labor force to
Yes,
work his
yes,
factories.
yeah,
It was like, hey,
absolutely.
we need these guys to at least understand, like, you know, bare minimum mathematics, bare minimum reading and writing so that they can read manuals, so they can learn how to put these cars together and then do
Yeah.
just enough to be able
Worker
to do
bees.
this, to put part A and part B
Yeah,
together,
sure.
but not so smart that they were asking like, well, why the fuck am I spending,
Right.
you know, 50 years of my life doing this?
They don't teach critical thinking. My kids probably do 2 hours of school a day.
Well, here's the
and
problem,
they're-
right? Well, here's the problem with that, though. I agree in mass, but there will always be the exceptions to the rules. I'm sure that when you were in school, you had certain teachers that brought out the best
there's
in you.
good teachers in public schools.
And I want to make
there's
sure we
bad
say
teachers.
that. Yeah. I want to make
absolutely.
sure we say that.
I mean, with any occupation. Yeah,
Yes.
good doctors, bad doctors,
So when
good cop, bad cop, whatever it is.
The reason I say this is because whenever I start to talk to other teachers about public education, the very first thing they tell me is like, Ariane, you don't understand how hard it is. Ariane, you don't understand how hard it is. And I'm like, yeah,
No,
you're only proving my
sure.
point.
Right.
I don't understand how hard this is. So it's a broken system. We have to change
Absolutely.
it. I think it
Absolutely.
starts with something as simple as like 10 kids to a class and not 30.
Right.
Hire more teachers.
Sure.
I also think that I said that like school should never be more than 8 hours. I also don't. I fundamentally disagree with homework. If my kid's there for 5 to 6 hours, and you can't teach him in that 5 to 6 hour period, don't send him home. And now instead of me being able to teach him about life and be his father and mentor him, he's stuck fucking doing arithmetic. Like, what was he doing in class? If you're in school for 8 hours a fucking day, how are you sending my kid home with homework?
How many things? No, I agree with you 100%.
What the fuck are we talking about? That's like 12 hours then.
Yeah, that's insane.
Spent half the day there. He didn't get done.
Finland is.
Do you get homework after work?
Yeah.
Do you get? Oh, hey, you're about to leave work. Here's some more work to do at home. You tell him to go fuck yourself.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry for my.
No, you're good, dude.
I always hated that stuff. I was like, what do we do? Like,
I mean, but how much like stuff? So you want to learn, like, if you're gonna. So there's certain things in jiu-jitsu that you're gonna learn in the beginning that it's never gonna work, right? Like it's not going to. It's just part of the foundation.
Foundation.
Right? It's part of the foundation. So I understand that, but then how much of public school was a waste of the things that you learned?
Brother, it was daycare.
I knew.
When's the last time you used the slope formula?
I wish I knew the planets, because that was on the interview I got the other day. Like, can you name the 9 planets, or what? There's 10 now, or whatever it is.
No, they got rid of Pluto. It's not a planet
8.
anymore.
So it's 8.
I don't even know who has the jurisdiction for that. It's like, wait, hold up.
But there's so much stuff that is it's a waste of time. Like, why are you teaching kids things that is in almost any profession you're never going to use?
Yeah.
You know? Certain math, certain...
And this is, by the way,
garbage.
a very common critique of public school.
Yeah.
Is like, how much time have we spent on, I hate to say it this way, but like, I did stats, calculus 1, calculus 2, and all these other things in college even.
Yeah.
And then I get to the workforce, and I don't think I've ever done anything over like division and multiplication.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the extent to arithmetic
unless you're
that I've
in
used.
like a specific profession. You know, obviously, I believe some profession, like a doctor,
an engineer, what have you.
You need further education.
That's also not the majority of people.
Sure.
And then if that is the case,
into the real world and don't know how to do anything.
Well, okay, let me add to this. So, if the critique is that the public education system does not necessarily work, then the next logical question would be, what is it that would... You can't expect everybody to homeschool. I don't think you can. Okay.
Sure.
I think that it starts to make more sense with the more number of kids. Like if you have 1 kid, tough sell. If you have 5 kids, a little bit of an easier sell. Hey, we got 5 kids. Like, what's the amount of money we're going to spend on education? We might as well just do it ourselves, right? It's the same thing with daycare.
Yeah.
I think now daycare is getting so expensive that if like a
they're staying
woman
home,
doesn't make more than like $35,000 or $40,000 a year, you're better off just staying home.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is an interesting perspective. But anyway, so like if you homeschool, what are some of the things that you do with homeschooling that public education just doesn't do? Like, what is the added value you think you're doing?
I think schooling doesn't have to be like also sitting down in a classroom setting.
I agree.
Like,
especially for
my
boys.
kids play. If they can go outside, they will. My son, I will wake up in the morning, and my son Rowan, my youngest son's 7, he's gone. I wake up, go to check on him. He's outside doing something. You know what I mean? And because so his mother does most of the schooling, and she's done a great job with both of the kids. I would say they're probably advanced for their age. And
she homeschools them too.
My ex, yes.
Yes. So you guys are both like,
yes.
When they're with you homeschool, and then when we're there with her.
So I do.
My next question is
actually do more of like Bible teachings and things like that. But certain things that they're struggling with in school, we'll kind of go over more.
Like what? Like arithmetic, ABCs, reading,
writing. I mean, even things just like reading a clock.
Okay.
Like a clock with the hands, because nobody has to do that anymore. Certain things like that, writing cursive, things like that. Some math, yeah. But they have a program that's Christian based called The Good and the Beautiful. So, I mean, also like a college, I don't know if it is anymore, but because I haven't looked at the statistics, but not too long ago, there was the two lowest scores coming out of college were social workers and public educators.
When you say two lowest scores,
As in overall with their scoring on tests and things.
meaning they were
combined.
just what, the least intellectual?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Was public educators. Now, I don't know if that's true today. I would say it probably is. But I can teach out of a book that already has curriculum. The teachers aren't like coming up with it's something that the government has given them that you have to open a book and teach it. So, yeah, you should probably have some knowledge in that area, right? But it's not that difficult. When you said you don't know if you can do it, you can.
Well, I feel confident that I could educate on certain topics that I feel educated in.
Right.
So, like, if it's like finance, technology.
Sure. Yeah, but those are
But
really
if you're telling me,
things
like,
that are important because
or history. I love history.
most of the stuff that they're learning, like, they don't need anyway. You know?
Yeah, we were actually talking about that, like, off the record before you guys even showed up. We were talking about. I just basically said off the cuff. I was like, I think before I die, I'd like to be like a professor or a teacher of something, but like exclusively, I would call the class like adulting.
Right.
And it would be things that you would want to know as an adult. And obviously, over the course of time, it's like, I know this because I've done this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Something as simple as being able to tell time on a rotary and not a digital clock.
Now, like for me, all the things that I wish that I would known, that's what I'm trying to instill in my kids to be prepared for life. Because I wasn't. And one, my life was so consumed with sports, the god of sport, that's where all my time went. So then I went from sports to, well, it's still sport, but football, track, basketball to MMA, right? And it just continued on. So then I had kids, and there's all these things that I'm like, man, I want my kid to know this. I want my kid to know this. I want my kid to know this. But I don't know. I don't know how to do it because it was a waste of time. I'm not saying sports are bad. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm telling you that I wasted a ton of time, like getting up before kindergarten, dribbling a basketball up and down the driveway with my right hand and then my left hand wearing a mask so I couldn't look down at the ball. I was a good point guard, but what's the probability that
You're going to get to the NBA.
I'm going to be in the NBA or NFL or any of those things? It's not realistic.
Well, then the argument that someone could possibly have for both education, public education, and sports is like the intangibles that you will inevitably learn through them. And I can attest to this because, like, university was where I first started to critically think.
Right.
Up until then, I wouldn't necessarily say that I did. But even in university, I didn't do it nearly as much as I do it, like, in the workforce, in my job, right?
Yeah.
It was like the precursor of it. But what university did teach me, and I will give this the credit now, whether it's worth $20,000 a year is up to you to debate. But it taught me how to manage my time. It taught me how to handle like a high stress environment. It taught me to accept deadlines, like it needs to be done by 11:59 on this day, or else it's overdue. So there's a lot of structure and stuff that I did learn from school. But I would also make the argument that that's the exact same things that you can learn from the military, from working right out of high school, from entering a trade school. Like, these are not exclusive to university. And I think that, you know, the original higher forms of education were literally just men sitting around contemplating, theorizing meanings to life, why certain things are the way they are, what could be hypothesis and all these other things. And I think to myself, like, with our advancements of technology now, where we're at as a society, you could make the argument that we've attained this level because of this type of education. I am susceptible to some of the criticisms that I say about public education. I do.
Sure.
And I think the answer is a homeostasis where everyone is at the very least has a certain level of education. I think as a society we want that. The where I disagree is that we took this system that was made literally 80 years ago and we are still doing the same shit the same way we were doing it. There's nothing else that we are still doing the same way we did 80 years ago.
Yeah.
For better and worse.
If you, from 1 to 10, on a scale from 1 to 10, how many people do you think on that scale are educated?
You mean like in America?
Yes.
when you say educated, you mean like high school education? Like what, ready to work? Like, forgive me, like add some nuance.
Sure.
So like ready to work. When you say like educated, what is the threshold? Like,
Yeah, that's fine.
ready to be a functioning member of society?
Yes.
Can I be honest with you?
Yeah.
1 or 2, but it has nothing to do with their cognitive abilities of like what they can recite and how good they can take a test. It has everything to do with like their makeup.
Sure.
And being ready to tackle the world.
Right.
Because here's the problem. As the world becomes more technologically advanced, as things become more complex, you're going to need to educate better, more efficiently. So to your point, if we continue to educate the way we are, and then by 18 years old, you've just basically created a labor source to do like menial tasks, you're going to have to educate even more now just to get them to like a level to where they're useful to people. The same education system that created the labor force for a manufacturing facility is not going to work for a tech company, for whatever it is that we're creating now with like, you know, the machinery that we have now, the technology that we use now. It's so much, especially once you start adding AI. We need to fundamentally change the way we educate to like, we have so much limited time with these kids. If every single moment of their education is not something that is tangibly useful in their life, or to expand their cognitive ability through like imagination and theory and critical thinking. I would love a class in my 5-hour day of school where for 1 hour, all it is questions about current events and how you think, and like have it open to the class.
That used to be that way.
It used to be that way. It used to be that way. And then what happened? Department of Education.
Yeah.
And then we federalized that shit.
So the reason that I asked you that.
Now we're illiterate,
on
like
the
by
scale
proxy.
From 1 to 10, and you said 1 or 2, which I agree with
Yeah,
you.
like 1 or 2
how many people
ready.
graduate from high school in America? 90%.
Yeah, that's scary, isn't it?
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like 90%.
There's a disconnect there.
Yeah, there's
a disconnect
something
there.
not right there.
Well, how about this? Like, dude, you want to talk about like, I hate to say this, but like COVID and what we did with COVID.
Yeah.
It shows, okay, the output or the outcomes of COVID and how we now have a generation of children that are stunted and not ready to even graduate high school. It proves through the data, at least by the way that we're measuring it through test scores and all that public education has value. And I think what we're discussing right now is not that public education is valueless. It has some value. What I'm asking more broadly is, you know, if we are going to dedicate 18 years, or I guess they start, 5 years old? So 13 years of my kid's development to this thing. I want to make sure the juice is worth the squeeze.
Absolutely.
Is my kid going to be ready to like work for a company after that, or start a company, or become an entrepreneur, or maybe they don't even want to do that? Do they have the skill set to just live off the land? Do they have the skill set to do whatever it is that they have? No, they can recite the Pythagorean theorem, and they don't know how their fucking computer or iPhone works.
100%.
So it's like, what are we doing here? How are we educating them in what way?
Yeah.
And then we have a growing number of kids that are committing suicide. We have a growing number of kids that are feeling lost and hopeless. We have a growing number of kids that aren't prepared for the real world and the trials and tribulations that are going to occur. Yeah. I have faith in the next generation because they're going to inherit the world we give them. But I want to make sure that if we do that, we prepare them as best as we can. I think.
No, I agree. And I agree. Like you said, that the university taught you some good things, right? Like time management.
It wasn't worth $20,000 a year.
Yeah, but with that, like I believe that
to learn that shit on YouTube now.
I believe that you should be coming out of maybe 8th grade and knowing how to manage time and those type of things.
I would make the argument that for like 60 to 70% of the degrees that are coming out of university now are not needed.
Yeah.
So like this is this is like an education issue across the board. Like I can take a person out of high school and I can make them an entry-level data analyst off of a few YouTube videos on how to use Microsoft Excel. And they can have a job making $50,000 a year, which doesn't seem like much, but it's the entry-level job. You know how to do the bare minimum. You don't even need a high school education for that. Yeah. Can you do a VLOOKUP? Can you do a pivot table? I can get you a job. Why are we not catering our education to the sources of labor that require them? And that's difficult to do because we understand how things change, but then be proactive and not reactive. Do you know anything about AI at all, how it works? Kind of? Outside of ChatGPT when you use it to do stuff for you? Do you have any idea how a language learning model works? The logic behind it? The GPU, the actual hardware that is required, or the amount of energy that is required to function.
No,
that
I know that.
okay.
But, like I don't know. I know it like outsources data like openly and that stuff, but I don't understand like the nuance. Like I can't get into the wits of it. I understand it kind of basic level.
Yeah. Do you know how the software in your iPhone works, or how the hardware components in that how they operate?
Not. I guess not the iPhone.
When you press play on your computer to turn it on, are you aware of like the GPU, the CPU, the motherboard, how any of that interconnects with one another?
It signals to each other and turns off. Yeah, that's basically.
These are the things that we use every day to do everything that we do, from being productive to communicating and all these other things. And the majority of people have no idea how any of this shit works.
Yeah.
Doesn't that seem kind of crazy to
Well, I
you?
would say, to a degree.
Now, not
So, like,
everybody's going to be technical. I understand that.
So we're technologically
But high level.
advanced, but I think it has made us dumber.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Convenience
Yeah.
is a hell of a drug.
Yeah, that's what America worships.
Well, dude,
God of convenience, the God of sport.
I don't know what the future holds in terms of education. I know that the current administration is going to defund the Department of Education. So
Yeah.
I guess in a lot of ways, we're going to see in real time whether or not we're right or wrong.
Right.
And we'll see the culmination of that. But I also think that the very metric in which we measure success in education, the standardized testing format, is so archaic and so bad.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
Give me 5 minutes with a kid. Let me talk to them, and I'll tell you where they're lacking.
Yeah.
Ask them a couple questions about, do you read any books? Are you interested in this, that, or the other? You can get a lot just from a basic conversation.
Sure.
And if we're going to spend all these hours testing these kids, how about we spend a little bit of time getting to know them?
I agree.
Maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, I think that's why homeschool's the way to go. And again, I'm not saying that everybody can do it. Like if you're a single mom, and some people might get to that point where they want to do it and they can't financially do it at the time. But I hear that all the time, as in, well, we would like to homeschool, but we just can't afford it. Well, dude, you got a $50,000 bass boat and $100,000. Like if you sacrifice some things, that you could do it. You know what I mean?
I think that criticism can be used for a plethora of things in life,
Sure.
but I agree with you 100%. It's not necessarily the case of we can or can't. It's we chose not to.
Right. Absolutely.
Here's my question for you. What do you think of private school then? We've talked about public school. We talked about homeschooling. What do you think about private schooling?
I think it depends.
Because
I think it's better than public.
Well, because I was going to say, because
But-
we were talking about the faith in the schooling.
Sure.
And a lot of private schools, at least the ones that I've seen, are, the one that's, I don't want to say this. There's one that's very close to my house, and I'm not trying to like dox myself, right?
Yeah.
Catholic school. And all of the neighbors around me, I see every morning when I get up to go drop my daughter off at grandma's, because my mother-in-law watches our kid. We don't, not that I don't believe in daycare, I do, but, we retired her. Like, let's use her. You know what I mean? Like, she likes watching the kids.
Yeah.
No one I trust more than her.
Yeah.
As I'm
That's
driving
the
my,
best thing you can do.
dude, it takes a village.
Yeah.
As I'm driving her, I see all the kids in like our neighborhood with their parents walking to that school, and it's like beautiful. It's like something I see when I was a little kid. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I don't really see that much anymore. And I was telling my wife, I'm like, we got this place literally down the street. I'm just gonna look into it.
Yeah.
Much cheaper than I thought it was gonna be. The curriculum was exactly what I would expect from something you're paying for.
Right.
Like very structured, like 1, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. This is what we're gonna learn. And I don't know, man. I come from public school and I want to believe in public education. I do. But the more I start to look at my own child, the less I want to give her up to that public education, and the more I want to get her into the private education.
Pastor I listen to named Vodi Bakum says, if you send your kids to Caesar, don't be surprised if they come back as Romans. You send your kids to the government. You know what I mean? And even with the private schools, I'm pretty sure a lot of that is government still.
It depends. It depends on a bunch of things, but you're not wrong.
And,
If they subscribe to a certain curriculum and things like that, if they want some sort of
teachers are
government
certified
subsidies,
through the state, So
yeah, but a lot of the Catholic schools aren't.
Yeah.
And this one is a Catholic school. Now, I'm not Catholic. I grew up Greek Orthodox.
Yeah.
But as far as I'm concerned, like, I'm just worried, Garrett, more than anything, man.
Dude,
I feel like we succeeded in spite of, not because of public education. Does that make sense?
Sure.
And I just worry. I just worry. And that's the thing. I know a bunch of school teachers. I coach at a high school, and I know some of these school teachers, and I know that they're good people, they're good educators. But I hate to say it this way. It's like you pull one or two of them out, and you might not have any other good ones.
Yeah, but you also have the influence of, man, everything. Not so. I think that you should expose your kids in a healthy way to things that aren't good.
Agreed.
Right?
Or else they grow up in an echo
but
chamber.
not at 5 years old, certain things, you know what I mean? But almost everything that I was influenced by was at school from another kid. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Music, which had an impact on my life. You know what I mean? You don't know until later on, but the stuff that I listened to, the stuff that I watched, like that carries on to your daily life and who your character is.
That's a very good point to make. That's how it was for me too. Middle school, I was more influenced by my friends than I was my parents.
Absolutely. Which,
That was a
as
little
parents, we're again called to be the most influential people in our kids' lives, not the friend, not their friends. You know what I mean? And for me, it was my friends. I spent more time with my friends than I did with my parents. You know?
Can I ask you another question? And that's the social atmosphere. Because one of the things I do think is good about public school is that, for the better and worse, it allows you to be in proximity to a bunch of people that don't necessarily come from the same culture as you or the same family unit and all that. And it can lead to negative outcomes, but it can also bolster someone's like the social IQ or the EIQ of an individual to like better handle the various people that they're going to meet in their lives. I'll explain to you the different way. You can see the difference between kids that like went to preschool and the kids that didn't, right? Or so like one of the things that I like about taking my kid to grandma's is because the other, like my sister-in-laws, they have kids and they do the same thing. So my daughter is not alone in isolation with grandma. She's with her cousins and there's like a bunch of them and they're constantly playing. And I like that they have a close bond because they're constantly together all day. And I can see the oratory skills with my daughter. She's learning a lot of different words. She's not even 3 yet. I can have conversations with her. So there's a lot of benefits to that. But like I wouldn't want to isolate my daughter. One of the things that I see, the critiques about homeschooling is that aspect of like keeping them kind
socialized.
Yeah, it's like, well, they only have those 3, which the argument can be made that they could grow and bond with one another, but it's not the same as being in a class of 20.
So I get asked the same questions, and one is always socialization. What about your kids being social, right? And Luke 6:40 says a disciple is not above his teacher, but he who is trained will become fully like his teacher. So with that being said, do I want my 7-year-old being socialized by other 7-year-olds? To a degree. Now, I would rather be doing that. Look, all my three of my kids are homeschooled. They don't have a problem with socialization.
Yeah.
And it's they're in wrestling, they're in church, they're in gymnastics. Like there's a lot of other ways that you can get that without having to take maybe negative things with it. You know, you're going like there's been things like that are going to happen too. Like there was something that happened in wrestling class one day that the kid said to my daughter that was inappropriate, and it's a discussion that we have to have after, you know, but it's a learning experience. Look, okay, so yeah, that kid, his dad called me saying he was sorry, you know what I mean? And the next day, the kid came and apologized to me and my daughter. And
God bless.
And it was just something that she shouldn't hear as a 6-year-old, you know? But I'm also able to try to show Christ in this, as in, look, he said something that he maybe did mean, maybe didn't mean, but he's apologizing now, and we're called to forgive. So he came and apologized, and my daughter said, "I forgive you." You know what I mean? And so hopefully, like she learns how to navigate those things on her own from those unhealthy situations that we try to make a healthy situation, you know?
We talked earlier about like how the peaks and the valleys kind of shape us, and then here I am telling you about like, you know, I want to take my kid to the best school and all this other stuff. It's like,
So, man, one of the things that I've always tried to figure out since I became a dad was because so many good things did come out of my struggles that you can't get without struggles, right?
yeah.
So, like, how do you get your kids to be able to behave in that way, I guess, without them having to go through those same things?
I asked my dad that question.
I don't know. I don't think you can. But
Well, what you're asking is
maybe there's other ways.
how do they learn from struggle without being put into struggle?
Well, at least the same type.
Yeah.
Because I mean,
Do you create artificial struggle?
yeah, absolutely.
You have to.
Yeah.
If you don't have your own hurdles, don't
certain
create 'em.
things like even like
I think sports.
yeah,
That's
Sports is a
yeah,
good one.
wrestling. I mean,
Wrestling's
dude,
the best.
That's the best one.
That's why I love. That's why I love wrestling because you can't. It's one-on-one. I can't blame my coach.
No.
I can't blame my teammates. Like it's you and the failure. You know what I mean? You're gonna get embarrassed some, and you have to learn to get through these things and keep going. But I even with my kids sometimes like say that I went through. I don't do it that often, but if I went through like McDonald's, went through the drive-through, and my kid, my son, they both want chicken nugget Happy Meals, I get them cheeseburger Happy Meals and see how they're going to react. Like, look, this is going to happen in real life. Like, you're getting things that you want, you're not going to get. You're not going to always get what you want. How are you going to respond? You know, I don't do it often, but it's just something for them to be like, look.
Curveball.
Yeah, one day we're going to have to deal with adversity, and this is not harmful for them now. So let's start doing it now and get ready for manhood and womanhood.
Actually, I actually like that. Just kind of like throwing the curveball and saying like, oh, this is what you want. Okay, well, you're gonna have this.
Yeah.
I never thought about it like that. My thing was always like the absence of like
it's-
we're not gonna go get McDonald's.
Yeah,
Today we're not getting
It's
McDonald's.
not to be mean. You know what I mean?
No,
I'm not
no.
yeah.
I agree with it 100%.
Right, yeah.
You're introducing like, hey, you didn't get what you wanted today. That kind of
Yeah,
sucks, didn't it?
yeah.
How are we going to react and overcome? It's just like
Absolutely.
educating them emotionally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, sometimes at least you have a meal.
Sure.
You know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
lessons
and that's
to be
the thing
learned.
that's difficult for, I think, for kids, man, is, you know, like we'll go to other places and man, we have a beautiful home in the middle of the woods and we'll go somewhere and the kids, oh, well, they've got this, the kids got this toy and this toy. I'm like, man, like trying to teach them to be grateful in what they have. It's without the struggle. Listen, because before, man, before I thought I wanted all these things, man. And one of my favorite verses says, first seek the kingdom of God and the rest of these things will be added. So what I used to do with scripture was make it about me. Like, okay, well, if I go after God, like he's going to give me all the things that I want, right? The irony of it is he did and showed me that it meant absolutely nothing. I had a nice house. I had a little yacht. I had a nice vehicle. And I was going through custody stuff with my kids. And I was in Tennessee. And I would drive past the baseball field and see the kids outside playing and cry. And taking my boat to the lake. Because it didn't mean anything. It meant nothing. I would rather live in a tent on the side of the road with the people I love than have all the stuff. But how do you get to that point without those type of struggles? You know what I mean? As in knowing that some people can, but you just don't see it that often, you know?
I don't know if they can, and I
Yeah.
hate to say that as an
Yeah.
answer. Like,
But I do know people that have some, like, are pretty wise in they make a lot better decisions. Maybe because they've seen people do it wrong.
Yeah.
And that's, dude, if I'm an expert at anything, it's telling people how not to do something, man. You know what I mean? It's like,
no, I wish I could sit here, and it's something I've contemplated myself because me and my wife, we grew up very poor, both of us. You know, first generation immigrants, came over here when we were very young,
yeah.
and we struggled until we weren't.
Yeah.
So now we're blessed with a lifestyle where my daughter will never truly understand. But here's okay. So let me kind of piggyback that off of though. My parents had an infinitely harder life than I had. They grew up in communist Albania.
Sure.
I didn't grow up in communism. I didn't have any of the struggles they had. And then look how we turned out, kind of thing. So I don't necessarily know. I think two things can be true at the same time. I think that struggles can make you stronger. I think that's a thing.
Sure.
But I also don't think you need to be struggling to be strong.
Sure.
I think
I
strength can be learned in a different way. So I think we're a little biased because we put too much onus of who we are in those valleys.
Sure. That could definitely be true.
Maybe we learned a lot more from the peaks too.
Right.
I don't know. All I know is I didn't struggle the same way my parents did, and we turned out everything they wanted and more.
Yeah.
So maybe my daughter won't have to struggle the same way I did, and the same might happen to her.
Right.
Or it might regress. All I know, Garrett, is this, and I don't know how I know it, I just know it. If I give her love, and if I give her direction, but I don't push her, here's the paths before you. Let me instill to you confidence and inner peace, and know that I'll always be there for you so long as I live. And then by the time that I die, you will be prepared to inherit this earth. Then she will inevitably make the right choices in time, even if they don't seem right at the time. You made a lot of choices when you were younger, and they've turned out now. Look at you at 36, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's a little bit more of an investment. Maybe I don't see it at the point of the decision being made. But all I can do is instill into her all the things that I think are important, and then I have to let her run.
Right.
And that's going to be the
I would
toughest part.
say yes, and how you treat your wife.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because one day
She's going to watch that shit.
Yeah. So one day she's going to marry somebody, and I think about it all the time. And me and my kids, like we pray about their future jobs and their future husband and wives. You know.
Does your daughter date your oldest daughter? No, she's in school.
He's a.
Oh, sorry. Your son
a
is the
boy.
oldest. Forgive me.
Yeah.
Sorry, your
No,
daughter's the middle.
I don't think that.
You haven't hit it yet, thank God.
What?
It scares the shit out of me, her dating.
Yeah. Well, I'm not. They're not going to date until they're ready to. I don't think.
Even your boys?
No. I would say maybe, like, depending on their maturity level and how they've conducted themselves to a certain point, like if you live in my house, because God's purpose for a man and a woman to come together is marriage. So in the Bible, there's not recreational dating. It's not like test driving a car like we do in America now. I mean, I did it for years. You know what I mean? The purpose is for one man, one woman to come together in marriage. So in the Bible, it's courtship. You're courting this person in preparation to marry them. Not that it's always going to work, I guess, but it's different than what it is now. Okay?
Do you think, though, because I can only speak for myself anecdotally.
Yeah.
I think that you can have two things at the same time. Can you not have that dating aspect with the full intention? Dude, there was, when I was younger, 16, 17, 18, where I thought I was in love. I was like, I'm going to marry this girl. That was my intention when I was little. Little did I know how stupid I was and how people change in time and stuff like that. But I think it's also entirely possible that the intentions can be pure.
So it could
and still not sprout to that end goal.
I think that it could be pure. I mean, you do see people that have been high school sweethearts. You know what I mean? Not very often.
It can work. It can work.
Often, but it's possible.
Usually
right?
it doesn't.
But even with the right intention, can you protect her? Can you provide for her? Because you probably shouldn't get married if you're still living at your dad's house. You know what I'm saying?
By that logic, though, you know, how many people had the right partners early who just needed to sprout as individuals and as adults, but would have never been given the chance if they weren't ready? Like, I think two things can be right. I think you're correct with your assertion of what relationships should be. But I also don't want to see a world where, like, you have to wait until the guy has his own place and all of his money in line and all these other things, because then you're not going to get married till you're 30.
I'm not necessarily
or
saying...
start dating until you're 30.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily saying that. Well, I do think that because now there's like 38-year-old boys.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And I think that you should be
Dude, you're so
a
fucking
lot closer to being a man at a younger age than what we are. And I'm guilty, dude, like, because, and what I say is my supreme authority is scripture. So when I talk about manhood, I'm talking about what a biblical man is, what God says a biblical man is. And for 34 years, I was not, and I'm 36. You know what I mean?
That's a good run rate.
Yeah, dude. So I don't want that for my sons. I don't want that for my daughter, you know? I don't think, because, dude, you know, like, you see, like, little kids, like, oh, he's got a little girlfriend, like, what? Like, you're 7 years old. That's not your time.
Okay, but let me flip it on its head. Just an anecdotal piece of evidence. Your son is 18. Your oldest is now 18.
Yeah.
He comes up to you and says, Dad, I love this girl. Goes to the church. She's 17. He's 18. Maybe the money's not there. Maybe him as like a man, he's not ready there to provide and protect.
Yeah.
But the intentions are pure. The heart is good. He loves this girl.
Yeah.
This girl loves him.
Yeah.
I mean, dude. Now I understand.
I'm
that
not. So I'm not cutting it off.
Okay.
Right.
That's kind of where
it's
I'm at.
not like a. It's not that black and white, right?
Okay.
So yeah, there's certain situations.
It's also loaded because I'm giving you the perfect example of something that you
So
should.
that is something that I would definitely be considered and probably okay.
Yeah, because
know?
I learned a lot from my failed relationships.
That's what exactly
Yeah.
what I was gonna say,
Yeah.
like, exactly what you said.
If
The
it
thing is like you. So I understand, like, because I have too,
And
but
I think being in a relationship, like, especially like my personal sense with the girl I am, pushes me towards being a better man.
well, because you found a girl that amplifies
yeah,
you.
Yes.
that could be.
One of
You know
the
what I'm
things that
saying?
I'll tell you this right now, I would not be the man I am today if it wasn't for my wife.
Sure.
Granted, we started dating.
Absolutely.
But when we started dating, it was also, I was 26 and we took the romance completely out of it. I was like, this is what I want. This is what I have to offer. What do you want? What do you have to offer? We basically did like an interview style for like 3 months over the phone while she was in Cali for work. And then once we realized that, like, okay, you want kids? I want kids. You want to get married? I want to get married. We kind of did
those are important questions to ask.
but I would have never asked them at 18. I had to go through the shit of like thinking I was in love,
Well,
of thinking that this was going to be the girl. You know what I mean?
Yeah, from your perspective, as in
Fair.
You know what I'm
Very
saying?
fair.
Like
Anecdotal.
my kids, it would be different, as in what. And I don't say that to be like
No,
me-
brother,
I'm
brother,
just
you're not
saying,
going to offend.
Coming from a biblical worldview on what marriage is supposed to look like, what courting is supposed to look like what our goal is here. Because I see, because along that, I agree with that it can definitely teach us lessons, and there's a lot of stuff that we learned from failed relationships. But I think about all the people I hurt during those times. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I learned a bunch, but I also hurt a bunch of people.
Well, let me return
that it
to
always
this
has
then.
to be that
But let
way.
me return to this then. Do you think if we went back to, would you be more for dating, like open dating, if we returned back to like a sense of sexual chasteness, to where people, because right now it's like a foregone conclusion that if people are going to start dating, they're going to have sex, as almost as if like sex no longer means anything, right? And I will be the first to admit that, like, because I have a daughter, I want her to date. I want her to get inundated with different kinds of guys, like the athlete, maybe the intellectual, whatever, to see what it is that she gravitates towards. But I'm not trying to have her sleep with every single one of them. You know what I mean? I want her to have that confidence in herself and that chasteness that, like, hey, this is precious, only to be given to a select man. You know what I mean? So it's like,
so I agree with that to a degree.
okay,
The thing is like, the more that happens, obviously the more temptation that you're going to have to deal with too.
Agreed.
So you would have to be very intentional on how you went about that as a father. You know what I'm saying?
agreed. I think it's a fine line. I'm not saying that it's going to be easy.
Yeah.
I'm saying that for me, like, ideally, what I'm trying to say is, if I do my job right as a man, as a father, I'll instill to her what a man should be like.
100%.
However, I will also acknowledge that she's a kid.
Right.
She's going to make some stupid choices. my job is to not prevent her from making those stupid choices. My job is to prevent her from making life-altering stupid decisions.
Yeah.
So I think that having sex out of wedlock with a guy that you're not going to marry is a life-altering decision.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If that's not going to be the one that's going to affect you later down the line.
I'm a man and I can say that.
I just had Jake on, like literally a couple hours ago, and he brought this up, and I think it's a big point. He said that, you know, the previous generation of women used to have like one partner.
Right.
They would get like
Right.
they're young,
Right.
court, get married, that's their partner. Now it's like the average woman will have upwards of 5 partners before they're married. And that this over sexualization of partners and stuff like that has led to relationships being very difficult to maintain because there's a constant sense of comparison between sexual partners,
100%.
so like there is some logic to what you're saying about like, hey, you know, I want this to be only happening if there is like a clear end goal at sight and we're all in agreement with what that is.
Right.
However, I've seen too the fathers that are too restrictive.
Sure.
And then what do the girls do the second they get an ounce of freedom?
Right.
Run
And
wild.
I think that would go back to like what you said on how you are as a father.
Yes.
If you love her, show her respect. You know what I'm saying? That you guys build a relationship, that you trust each other, and then she's not gonna want to let you down.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
I agree 100%.
So yeah, I think it could go either way, but
just
depending on
scares
how
me,
you,
brother.
yeah, me too, man, me too.
I know how fucking stupid I was.
It's one time I was at a wrestling match and my daughter was with me and I was going to the bathroom and I go into the bathroom and I said, "Hey, stand right outside the door and I'll be right here." And I come out and she was talking to another little girl, but a kid bigger, like quite like a foot taller than her, come over to her and handed her this little card. And I walked over and I picked it up and it was like this. It had like a what do you call those things on your phone? Emojis.
Oh, emojis
with
okay.
like hard eyes and
He
like
gave it to her on a
kiss.
card?
It was just like a little card that was already but he handed it to her and I went over there and I picked it up and I was
Damn,
like,
dude.
"What is this?"
I didn't know you could do
And then-
emojis physically.
Well, it was like just like a sticker or something.
Oh,
on
okay,
a
gotcha.
card, like a
Gotcha.
little bitty card, and like man, inside of me, I just told the kid, I was like, "Is your dad here?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Go get him." He didn't go and get him. He left, but he didn't come back. But so because I don't think. Look, so when that bell goes off in a kid's head, like when my son realizes, which he already has, that girls don't have cooties, that he's attracted. You know what I'm saying? When he realizes
Yeah,
that
brother, I do.
girls
I
don't
was
have
there.
cooties,
It happened to me too.
He's attracted to the opposite sex.
It happened in middle school.
It's not your time to participate. It's your time to take seriously your preparation for doing it one day, getting ready for that time, not participating in because what happens now is like I said, 38-year-old boys, we want to reap all the benefits without the responsibility of being a man. We want to have sex, we want to do this, we want to do that, but
Garrett, I don't even think we want to have sex. I've thought a lot about this. I'm curious to hear what you would say about this. When I was younger, I was lied to. I was told by other men that somehow acquiring sex made me a man, and that the more sex that I would have, therefore, the more women liked me, the more manly I was. I can't tell you like how ashamed I am of the past that I've had.
Yeah.
And it was 100% because I correlated somehow that like my masculinity was tied to the women that I could acquire.
That's
and
what the world says.
Exactly.
And it's
Now,
the 3 Bs.
well, now I'm in a position where I mentor young men, and my thing is the exact opposite. I say a real man is the one that can take on the responsibility of his actions. And I was like, and if you want to play hard, then get ready to fucking work hard. And
it's way harder to do the right thing.
100%.
You know
It's
what I
way
mean?
harder to
Like,
be disciplined.
yeah.
What is more manly? Saying no to something you
Absolutely.
want or saying yes to everything
Yeah,
that you
absolutely.
want? Discipline is fucking difficult.
Absolutely.
And I wish I would have known that when I was younger.
Yeah.
I wish I would have. Unfortunately and fortunately, it took me a little while to get there,
Sure.
but I'm here. And now I just,
Manhood now is measured by the bedroom, the ball field, and your billfold.
You're not wrong.
How do you perform in the bedroom? How many girls do you get? How much money do you have? And how are you as an athlete? Pretty much is what the world says is a man, which is totally opposite of what Scripture says.
What makes a man in Scripture?
Protector, provider, basically priest. Your whole job is to lead your family. My job as a father is to wash my wife in the Word, pray for her, pray with her, pray with my kids. But during that whole time, letting the kids see our relationship and see us reading together, praying together, and taking my kids, because the Bible says to go out and make disciples of all nations. It's a command that as a believer, if I am a believer and I have been transformed from somebody who I wish I never was, to having Christ, why wouldn't I want everybody else to experience that? So you go out and make disciples of all nations. My job is to train my children up to be little missiles, to go out and share the gospel and to bring people to Christ. I don't think there's anything more important than that.
Brother, I wanted to thank you for coming in and giving me so much of your time. I know that you live a ways away and that you kind of made the most out of like two birds, one stoning this thing. The last question I have for you, Garrett, and it's something that I wrestle with for myself. What does the next chapter mean for you? What is your goal now?
So my goal now would be basically just what I said with leading my family. My identity is in Christ, so I'm going to be okay regardless of what happens. Still training. Still train. I still love to train, but really, dude, there's nothing else in the world that I'd rather be doing than being a dad.
God bless.
Yeah, there's really not, man. And me and my wife, we had been trying to have, dude, I want like 4 more kids.
No shit.
Yeah, dude, but it hasn't. We've been trying for a couple of years and nothing's happened.
Do you mind if I ask how old she is?
She's 32.
It's not an age. I mean, my wife got pregnant right before 30, but I'll tell you this, second one seems to be a lot harder than the first one.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting.
Yeah. But with that, we're also in the process of fostering kids. So we're going through the process right now. We had an interview. They've done all our references. And
do you mind if I ask, and if this is too personal, let me know. Have you guys only tried like natural? What do you think of like IVF or any of that stuff? I
wouldn't do it.
Is it
because it kills more babies than abortion?
Can you? Is it okay if
like 7% of those live?
Yes. Okay. So can we explain a little bit the process? Is essentially why you might be against it and why some people might not be. So through the process of IVF, they take multiple eggs from the female and essentially inseminate them with the sperm of the husband. And what you're essentially having, and you're putting in cryostasis and you're kind of elaborating which ones you want to do, is which ones you want to pick that have the most propensity for like fertilization attaching to the lining. Mm-hmm. So to your point, when you said that like a lot of it causes, I want to be careful because I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you were going along the lines of like saying there's a lot more negative that comes from that than positive.
I believe so,
yeah. And that's actually a common critique that I hear from people is like, dude, how many, like you're essentially creating 10
so
different
I thought it was, I didn't really know what it was until I researched it and found out what it was, because Trump passed something recently something about IVF that was going to help, like make it cheaper maybe.
And essentially eliminating some of the barriers.
Right. So when I first
because fertility
heard
is becoming such an issue.
Right. When I first heard that, I thought, okay, maybe this is good for me and my wife. But then after researching it and seeing what it was, dude, we're not.
Not considering
Yeah,
it.
no.
Would you ever consider, I know that you're considering fostering, but have you ever thought about also surrogacy, where you take the egg from your wife, your sperm, and then you have someone else carry the child? Have you thought about that?
We haven't talked about that.
Forgive me. I'm
No,
getting
you're good.
very, I'm
No,
getting
no,
very.
dude, you can ask me whatever you want.
The reason I bring that up is, I don't know if you know this, but Michael Chandler just had his first daughter. So they took, his wife wasn't able to, I'm butchering this and I'm trying to navigate this as respectfully as I can. So forgive me. They were unable to have kids, Michael Chandler and his wife, but they were able to take the embryo from his wife, the sperm from him, and they had a surrogate mother who actually just gave birth to like their biological kid.
Yeah, man, I don't know.
Right?
On
It's
that, right. It's something that I would have to like pray about. I'd have to seek counsel.
But it wasn't something you guys have even talked about.
We have never talked about it. No, I don't.
I'm hitting you with a lot. Forgive me.
No. You're good, man. I don't know if it's something that I would have. I got to go to scriptures and say, look, is this okay? You know, but it's something I've never even thought about. It's something that we might talk about. But you know, also like, dude, sometimes God closes doors. You know what I mean?
Well, maybe fostering is then the option.
Exactly. That was where I was going with that. Is, I mean, when I was fighting for the Contender Series, dude, like, even though I half-assed my career, I thought up to that point, dude, God's opening that door. Man, dude, I've been waiting for this chance. Go break my jaw in the first round. It was one of the coolest and worst experiences at the same time. But it was a door that was closed. And sometimes, you know, back to, you know, we don't understand everything that happens, but it happens for our good. And now, like, looking back, I think it was for my good on who I became as a person. Like, I don't know. Obviously, we can go back and, because it is the unknown, right? And you could say, well, maybe you'd be a better person. But probably not, man. Probably not. Because of how selfish I was with what I wanted, you know? So, I mean, dude, me and my wife will like get on the adoption sites, you know? And dude, I want to take all of them. Like, and then we got, it's $50,000 to adopt a kid. What, this kid doesn't have a home.
Excuse me?
No, dude, look into it, man. And
where does that money go to? For what?
Good question. Home? It's like trafficking, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you look into
You're
it,
selling
man, look,
humans.
And you can buy like if you wanted a white baby, it'll be more expensive.
$50,000
maybe more sometimes
to
adopt a baby that doesn't have a home
in the state of Illinois, or like is this
Probably
like across the board?
Can
you Google average cost of fostering a child?
No, not fostering.
Sorry, adopting a child. Forgive me. Sorry,
yeah.
wrong verbiage. Thank you for keeping me honest. What?
The cost of working with an attorney and not involving an agency may range from $8,000 to $4,000.
That's without an agency.
$40,000.
Because you have to work with an attorney.
So
20 to 45.
$20,000 to $45,000 is the average cost to adopt a child.
Correct.
Like,
just think, a kid that doesn't have a home.
I'm trying to understand where that money goes. Like when you say something's costing $30,000, for what?
Yeah.
To who?
I mean, that's my point.
My attorney?
Right.
Who's fighting me on this?
Yeah.
I thought it was as simple as like
it's the agencies, dude. It's a scam. It's a scam. Like they're profiting off of people that are less fortunate. Like, well, if you want this baby, you can pay $50,000 and take him home. But until then, we're gonna keep him. I don't know exactly how it works. Like if they'll go in the foster care system.
Can you Google something for me, Tony? Forgive me. Yeah. Can you Google government incentives to foster children or foster homes? I want to see something real quick, if you don't mind. Because then the only thing I think of is that it's like the same thing with like for-profit prisons where like the incentive is to incarcerate. If the government incentive exists that like they get so much money per head per year to, but I don't know if that's necessarily the case because I also think that a lot of foster homes are like
regardless
charities.
of that, like
monthly stipends or payments. So government will get, most states offer monthly financial assistance, healthcare coverages.
Through Medicaid and Medicare.
Yeah, training support.
No, but like
Tax benefits.
Okay, so like there are some benefits, but
sure.
But I would also say, like, unless there's like a check being cashed out in their name, then these are just basically like ways to limit the friction of these foster homes from like operating, because obviously taking care of children is an immense financial task.
So I asked ChatGPT, why does it cost so much to adopt a kid? Legal fees,
so attorney fees,
home study fees.
Home study fees. Oh, so they have to come in and check out to actually make sure that you're home.
Yeah, but why would that?
Why is that thousands and thousands of dollars?
Agency fees. And then I guess some money goes to the medical and birth mother expenses.
What?
Yeah.
Man, it's just one of those things like
Travel
where
costs.
like everything has became. It was one thing, and then we're gonna charge you. Now we're gonna add this fee and this
Dude,
fee and this fee.
50,000 is such an insane. If you told me 5,000, that would make sense. I'm like, hey, gotta pay for
I
lawyers.
agree. I agree.
50,000, brother. That's a fucking new Tesla. What are we talking about? That's insane.
That doesn't make any sense, man. To kids that don't have homes.
Who I'm sure if you ask the kids, they'd be like, sure, take me.
Yeah.
Free.
Yeah.
Brother, I can adopt a dog from a shelter for like $100.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll give it to you for free.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not trying to say that like animals are the same as children. That's not what I'm saying.
Sure.
What I'm saying is that is a frictionless process.
Yeah.
They are actively trying to get good homes for these animals. If you told me that the process of like finding good homes for kids is more thorough, duly noted.
Absolutely.
Is it $50,000?
No, it's not.
How about you check out my taxes and like you make sure that, hey, like we can actually like afford it. I already have 3 kids. Maybe that also helps.
Sure.
You know what I mean? That's insane.
Yeah.
Listen.
But ultimately, like with fostering, we would want to adopt. That would be our goal.
Yeah, 2 things that you've said today have shocked me. One was the Supreme Court rulings back in 62 and 63, eliminating the ability to like essentially, I guess, pray
Sure.
in the classroom, which I can't understand how that's legal when we have freedom of religion. And then second one is this foster fee. This is insane.
Yeah.
Well, then, okay, so let me ask you this question then. When you guys were going down the rabbit hole, is it for this one home, or is this like
Pretty consistently.
just kind of
And I will say that from what I look at, like, it costs more for a white baby than other ethnicities.
wow?
Yeah.
Is it because of that? Sounds kind of dark. I don't even want to ask that question.
Because it's a scam, is what I'm saying. You know what I mean? Like, they should all be as cheap as possible
Yeah.
so that they can have a home.
And what makes one cost more than the other?
If you obviously like you said, like there should be
Talk about valuing life. That's literally doing it.
thorough home checks and make sure that these people are,
That's what I thought. If
Yeah.
you told me $5,000 because got to pay the lawyer a grand or two to do the filing or whatever.
That's what he was talking about earlier was the $8,000 if you don't go through an agency. So like if you knew a girl that didn't want her baby and she just
Would
had the baby
sign
and
over
then,
legally,
like
guardianship.
like $8,000. But if you go through an adoption agency, it's like 40, 50 grand.
That's so insane to me. Fuck, dude. So then you might have like imagine how many kids are
Could
now
have
stuck
homes?
in foster care
Yeah, dude.
because the limiting factor of them
Yeah.
actually getting adopted
100%.
is just a monetary hurdle. Dude, 50 grand's a lot of fucking money.
Absolutely.
And then not to mention, you're going to pay 50 grand for them the privilege of having to like, facilitate financially this child for the rest of their life.
Sure.
Like that's just the tip of that iceberg. Insane.
Yeah.
Listen, I pray that you guys can get it done naturally. But if you can't, like you said, like if that door is closed, we've established that God works in mysterious ways. Who knows what good will come out in what way, but hopefully you guys can just like knock it out of the park the old-fashioned way. But
Yeah.
knock on
Yeah.
wood on
We've
that
been
one.
praying for that. But we'll see.
Oh, practice is always fun.
Yeah. All glory to God either way.
Garrett, I appreciate you being on, man.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
No, this was a pleasure, and thank you for taking the time. It means a lot to me.